Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the reading room for yet another debate dissection with my friend, your friend, and everybody's lover, Amber. How you doing?
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. I've
All right,
apparently got a busier dance card than I thought, but
right. I don't know. I still feel like I just throw things out for intros and see if they, if they fit well or not. I don't. I know when I see YouTubers, they always have a standard intro that goes exactly the same, and I don't think I've found mine yet. So I just keep rolling the dice on the intro and going, "Yep, what's
no,
it going to
that's
come out
that's
this
that's fair.
time?"
I
So
do. I
yeah.
kind of do the same thing. That's why I end up with weird adjectives. Like the other week, I called you magnanimous. I think it just
I believe so. Yeah.
yeah
So this is just returning the favor. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, fantastic. But how are you today?
Oh, mostly okay. I had my second
Good.
laser appointment today,
Uh-huh.
and I mean that's hugely wonderful because it helps permanently fix things in the general
Hmm.
fuzzy
Hmm.
areas and whatnot, but it hurts a lot.
Really? I thought lasers were pretty painless. Maybe I'm just watched too much Star Wars or something. I
It
just
may
think
be.
lasers,
I
modern
I don't know.
technology has to be painless and yeah,
Well, they
maybe
do a good job with it.
yeah.
It's very focused. It's set to specific wavelengths that it'll target, so it'll focus on hair more than anything else. Though it will
Hmm.
go after tattoos if there's one in the area,
Yeah.
other things like that. Also, they have like a like I don't know what cools it, like nitrogen cooled airflow that's beamed at you with a high pressure fan to cool the skin back down as soon as it's shot.
Yeah.
So for most of the body, it's just a sting wherever it hits. But where
Mhm.
there's a dense concentration of hair, like on
Right.
the face,
Yeah.
it hits it. A lot of things catch fire all at once, and it's
Maybe it's relative, like when sort of women say it's painless, maybe it's relatively painless in comparison to I don't know, wax or something like that. Maybe.
maybe,
I don't know.
maybe.
Those are things that I've never done, so I can't really. Maybe I should. Maybe I should wax and see for myself exactly how much pain it is,
I've
walk a
tried it
mile
a
in
couple of
shoes kind of thing.
times. I don't. I've been told I do it wrong. You're
Oh,
supposed to use like a special kind of wax and do it in a certain
oh,
way, and so on.
okay.
Like with you lay the wax down in the direction of the hair, and then you pull it
Yeah.
off against the direction of the. It doesn't matter. The point is, it does hurt, and it's not as effective as Nair,
Right.
which does
Yeah.
not hurt because
Yeah.
it'll last longer than shaving, but not as long as Nair. So just use Nair.
Okay, and if you give me super chats, I'll wax my head on camera at one point. If I reach $1,000 in super, I'm joking. I'm joking. Um,
Goals.
you know what probably put me off at the 40-year-old virgin and the waxing scene in there where they wax his chest hair and it like apparently I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but it is horrific. It's horrific. It's like a torture film. Um,
Oh my.
Yeah, well, I'm doing fantastic today. I've had a really busy few days. I've been keeping myself busy, which has been really good. I'm going to grab the video as what we're here for, which is the debate between D'Souza and O'Connor. And I purposely I did sort of go through this one in order to miss the start and all that kind of thing. But really, I haven't seen it, so I want to, give this as my first reaction to it. I haven't seen the arguments, haven't seen what they've said. Um, One thing I did notice, I went through, it's got no moderator. There's no moderator in it, which is kind of unusual, and it's
Mm-hmm.
unusual in a few respects. And I think Alex points that out at the start when I was like finding the start. I saw that. The other unusual thing was this, and we were talking about this earlier. This segment at the start of two random people from Pangburn just talking about the people kind of thing. Talking about
Yeah.
D'Souza and talking about Alex O'Connor, and it isn't really an introduction. It's more a like what we would do. We would say, "Hey, Alex is he's done this and he did a debate against this person where he did very well," kind of thing. Um, it seemed more like one of our introductions than an introduction to a debate where essentially what you would do is say, hey, Alex is a this person, D'Souza is this person, this is what they've done, welcome to the stage kind of thing. It was more a, well, he did a debate against Hitchens, and I think D'Souza came out on top kind of stuff. And it's like, that must be awkward watching it from the sidelines. Like, it seems, commentary, the moderators doing commentary up the start isn't really, I don't know. I don't know what they were trying for. And that led us to we don't know whether we've been doing this so long. We don't know whether we've done D'Souza versus Hitchens. And I wanted to sort of read the temperature of the room and see if anybody's interested in us doing that one.
A poll! People love polls. Yeah, well, good stuff.
It's not more a poll as trying to get people to remember whether we actually have done it or not, because I can't.
Oh, I see. Does anybody remember us doing it?
Right, right.
It's great to see Pangburn active again. They've been on. Maybe they started sooner, but I think they wanted to come back with a bang, which is why they got Alex O'Connor, and there was Dinesh. So whatever. But it struck me as like ESPN pre-game sports commentators. You may remember last season McFadden ran for 53 yards or some crazy shit like what are you doing? You're chewing up so much time that no one wants to see.
Yep. It's pointless. Absolutely pointless. Okay, but we've got it here, and I think it's full screened. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, fantastic. All right. Huzzah. Are you ready to go? Is there anything else we have to cover before we start? Well, just thank you for joining us, everybody. This is I've been looking forward to this. I really have. Just a quick note. Alex O'Connor is a philosophy educated. I believe he has a Bachelor of Philosophy. Very, very good at the technical aspects of all of philosophy, mostly morality. Fantastic. He's brought up some really interesting questions recently. I think his engagement with William Lane Craig was absolutely legendary. It really did highlight some of the really faulty thinking about what Craig thinks. I think that, Alex O'Connor is somebody making absolute waves. Dinesh D'Souza, I thought he was more of a commentator and journalist than an actual sort of debater. And I guess they're overlapping. I mean, just say, oh, well, he's just a, journalist.
I only ever knew him as an apologist. I didn't know he did journalism work.
Well, see, he was sort of he occupies a weird space, because I think he was a political commentator first, so it's kind of like a journalist in that sense, like Tucker Carlson is a journalist. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, so let's see. I thought he was more just a journalist commentator, but I could be wrong. Give me 1 second. Bachelor of Arts in English, Dartmouth College. Yeah, he wrote for the Dartmouth Review. He was a contributing editor for the Policy Review, published in Heritage Foundation. He was a policy advisor in the administration of Ronald Reagan. Oh, God, all right.
Oh,
so
boy.
He's sort of journalist is pretty weak kind of thing, but he's kind of a political commentator, author and filmmaker, basically. So he's more a pundit, if you will, than anything else. So yeah, I guess I am wrong. He doesn't have any credentials in journalism. But in 2016, Obama's America is a film that he produced. America, Imagine the World Without Her in 2014. Hillary's America, The Secret History of the Dead. Yeah, so really he's a right-wing, propagandist, essentially.
That tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, we see There are exceptions, like Bill Craig, who sticks pretty much to it's crappy academics, but the academic side of
Yes.
apologism, I suppose.
Well,
But then
he definitely is an academic, like he isn't going out and making, factually incorrect things for right-wing pundits.
and that's the thing is virtually
yeah,
every other major apologist, with the possible exception of Mike Licona, his arguments may be shit, but I haven't seen a political thing from him. But all the rest of them, Capturing Christianity, Frank Turek, Sean McDowell, name an apologist, and their Christianity and apologetics even is just a really thin mask for Christian nationalism. It's the nationalism they're after, not so much the Christianity.
Yeah. And just that real conservative, hand in hand with the Republican Party and everything they're doing. Although some do bend libertarian. Apparently, my memory is terrible. The audience says. This debate was okay, but that's right. I have to thank Robin for sending this one to me. I probably would have found out, but thank you so much, Robin. You are amazing and awesome, and this has got people talking. So without further ado, I guess we get into it. But Alex O'Connor and Dinesh D'Souza.
Hi everyone. I'm not really used to doing this kind of thing without a moderator, but we've had a conversation before coming out here, and we thought it would be good to sort of give each other 10 minutes each to lay out something of a case. We're not going to be too strict with that, but and then hopefully most of the time we can dedicate to just having a chat. Dinesh said that I can go first, which seems a little odd given that he's, I suppose, technically on proposition. But
yeah, that is weird. Dinesh is definitely the affirmative. I wonder why that is. Is he going to do a rebuttal in his introduction? That always annoys me. I don't know, just on the technical aspects of debate, it always annoys me when the rebuttal is in the introduction.
Sure.
Well, it's not so. It's just there's a lot of flat earthers, especially, do it. They will go, no, you go first, you go first, you go first, even if they're affirming the proposition, and then basically they're just waiting to hear what you've got to say so they can rebut it, knowing that you can't say anything afterwards. Really,
gives them time to type it into Chat GPT. How do I refute heliocentrism?
Yeah. Thanks,
what is the proposition, to refresh both me
is
and
the Bible
anybody
true?
Who doesn't know?
Yes, is the Bible true? Which seems to me like I think I mean, you could take that a lot of ways, but I think that's essentially the proposition. So there's no way you can interpret, like when you have what's one that I'm doing soon is evolution on trial, say. What's the affirmative in that? Like they're
it's difficult to say.
Right, but this isn't that. Like, this is the Bible true? This is definitely, there's an affirmative for it. Technically, usually a debate has a proposition, as in the Bible is true kind of thing, and then you have affirmative and negative, but that's splitting hairs. Okay, so Star Song, thank you so much, Star Song. We have they haven't seen it, but you did D'Souza versus Hitchens 9 months ago. So everybody that voted my memory is terrible is absolutely correct. Congratulations. The doubters of my memory win the polls. Congratulations. Look, it just surprises me not at all. I live and die by my calendar. If things aren't in my calendar, my brain does not hold on to them. So sorry about that, people. I don't remember. Then I don't remember any debate where D'Souza came out on top. So obviously the Pangburn guy got a different thing than I did.
Yeah, he must have watched a different debate, I guess.
Maybe it's because I'm in Australia. I'm upside down. That must be it.
That could be, yeah.
I wanted to lay out a few different ways that I interpret the question and see where he wants to take it. Some people said that I shouldn't do this debate with this question. It's kind of an impossible question. It's the kind of question that requires more of an explanation to ask than to answer, which is a little bit strange. So I thought, the Bible is not a book. it's a library, and like any good library, it contains an amalgamation of different genres. And so asking if the Bible is true, you might as well ask if the corpus of Shakespeare is true. It sort of betrays a misunderstanding of how people interact with the text. So I thought, will Dinesh argue that the Bible is literally true, historically true, allegorically true, morally true, theologically true, metaphorically true? And I suppose the only thing for it is to sort of try each one on for size.
Yeah, and you kind of missed one, which is spiritually true. You know, like a lot of Christians, well, not a lot, but some Christians I've run into sort of say, hey, it's spiritually true. It has meaning in my life, which makes it true in my life, which... So what is true, first off? What's true to you, Ember? How do you evaluate true?
Just a default definition, that which matches reality.
Right. So I think that see, that would be, and truth for me, and it's just because I've been reading a lot of sort of how truth applies to propositions lately. And so when we have a proposition, it really is a function of language. And the underlying assumption for most things is, you know, whether it comports with reality. That's usually when you're saying, hey, it is true that Ember is wearing a hat, kind of thing. So I'm claiming that statement has a truth value. But a lot of what I've been reading is that truth is context dependent. So when, like, for instance, and I'll give you a really good examples here. When I say Superman comes from Krypton, that is true, right? Even though Superman and Krypton does not exist, right? That doesn't comport with reality. Okay. Another thing I could say is it is raining, right? And that could be true for me, and it can be false for you, because we're in different areas. You know, you're on the other side of the planet. However, having said that, so everything depends on context. And so when we say, is the Bible true? I would take your meaning. Is it true in reality? Does the events it describe occur in reality? Do they comport with reality of what happened or not?
Yeah, this is kind of the confusion of language sort of thing, because there's always these hidden parenthetical statements that generally go without saying. We can call them context, but they're there. Like the Superman thing. There's that unspoken parenthetical within the story of the comic, you know?
Correct.
Is that true?
So I think that's what he's alluding to, that if you're saying, well, it's true in an allegorical sense, that the people, it is true that the people believed they experienced it and wrote the book about it. I think he's closing doors on D'Souza. I think he's basically, I mean, we'll have to see, but I think he knows that there is this interpretation that the truth is contextual, and I think he's outlining all of the escape routes D'Souza can get. I think he's missed one, which is the spiritual truth, but I don't know.
He may have left that out intentionally.
Maybe.
From where I sit, this has been it's a masterful rhetorical stroke to open this way, because so many people on both sides miss that whole thing about the Bible being multiple books, not just one. And so if Alex doesn't point it out, then he leaves it to D'Souza to beat him over the head with it later. By taking it, if D'Souza addresses it, he got there first. If D'Souza doesn't, then Alex has the edge. Either way, fabulous move.
Absolutely. And I do like that he's addressing, like, I think he knows where D'Souza's going to go, and or doesn't know exactly, but knows a number of possibilities, and he is just addressing them up front, which is just wonderful. I mean, you can sort of sit there and hope that the opponent doesn't bring up all of these different things, or you can go after them one by one, and that's what he's chosen to do, which is amazing. Wow, and we're like 1 minute in, and already he's impressed me. This is Alex O'Connor. What are you doing?
So maybe beginning with Genesis, in an attempt, clearly not at historicity, but rather allegory and metaphor. We can deal with one of our types of truth here. We're introduced to Adam and Eve, who are told in no uncertain terms by God not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You may begin to wonder why knowledge of good and evil is such a bad thing, but the thought is interrupted by the introduction of the serpent, who says to Eve, did God say that if you eat of the tree, then in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. And Eve says, yes. And the serpent says, well, that's not going to happen. God just knows that if you eat of it, you'll become like him, knowing good and evil. And he doesn't want that. That's all. You're not going to die. So Eve famously takes the fruit, eats some, gives some to Adam. And what happens? Do they die in the day thereof? Some people say in a metaphorical sense, yes. We'll get to that in a second. But at least on the surface of it, no. What does happen? God tells us himself. He says, now the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and eat from the tree of life, lest he inherit eternal life. And with this, Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden. So who's telling the truth here? This story is quite mystifying to me, and I'm not the first to point this out. There's actually an apocryphal gospel discovered near Nag Hammadi in Egypt in the 1940s, dated into around the 2nd or 3rd century, called the Testimony of Truth, a gospel that didn't make it into the New Testament, which identifies the serpent, interestingly, who's never called Satan in the text, by the way, identifies the serpent with Jesus. I don't know if I'd go quite...
Yeah, I think that when and I think it was Aaron Ra that sort of pointed this out, when the only thing that said the only thing that said that the serpent was Satan was when it referred to Satan as that old serpent, right? And they sort of said, oh, well, that's the same serpent that is in the garden, but there's nothing that says that they are the same serpent, right? And in say the book of Job, like, so the serpent famously was cursed to crawl on its belly all of its days, kind of thing. That was the curse that God had for the serpent for, you know, tricking. It basically explained why we hate snakes, essentially. It says that the serpent shall strike at the woman's heel, and the woman shall crush the serpent's skull underfoot, sort of showing, hey, there's an enmity about these two because of this history, which is
thought that
a bit
was let me look that up
pretty
real
sure.
quick, because I think that was actually more of a prophecy sort of thing. I remember it being something along the lines of, the seed of woman will crush the serpent's head, and his head will bruise the heel.
Yeah.
And that's a really significant prophecy, if it is a prophecy, because remember, this language comes from King James, and at the time, the term seed was a euphemism for sperm. So it's like saying the sperm of a woman will create a child that will destroy the serpent utterly. And that's a very unusual situation. It's a little bit beyond the Tolkien thing, where Eowyn goes up against the Ringwraith, and the Ringwraith says, no man can kill me, and she goes, I am not a man, kind of thing. It kind of makes me think of Jesus, the way the story goes, how a woman produces a child without any father seed, but even that isn't really all of it. Like a woman producing seed, as you may recall from the video I did several months ago, Jesus and the 8 rabbinical genders or something like that. In the Torah, in the Jewish law that Jesus subscribed to, they recognized transgender people, both people who changed gender because of natural causes or who changed sex through the act of human intervention, and intersex people. They were all categorized in law. They were recognized, and the law described like what rituals they were to participate in, which ceremonies they were exempt from, so on and so forth. That's what the law was for. But the point is, at the time Jesus walked the earth, the culture he was immersed in recognized trans women as women. And so you had women who were able to produce seed in the biblical sense. Yeah, and so I kind of wonder. Certainty.
Yeah. I mean, it all is up to interpretation as well. But I'll just read out what the KJV says. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all of the days of thy life. So he's basically saying that's why snakes crawl, which is weird. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and thy seed and her seed. So yeah, you're right, their offspring and the snake's offspring. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. But the problem is that in Job, Satan is walking with God. He's walking side by side with God, and it's clearly walking there. on legs, right?
Mhm.
So it's this weird thing where later on down the track, even though it's been, you know, Satan's apparently, so there's nothing saying that the serpent in the garden is Satan. Absolutely nothing. That's something that's sort of been read into it, that's the bad guy. To me, this reads like a sort of just a mythology. You know, why do snakes crawl on the ground? Why do snakes bite people, and why are people afraid of snakes? And it's sort of one of those myths that's explanatory. You know, sort of so where does a rainbow come from? Well, we know it's scattering of light on water particles, you know, like it's just refraction of light. But, you know, it's this mythology sort of says, oh, well, God drowned the world and now he's promised not to, so he's put a, you know, colorful thing there. It's mythology. It's attempting to explain the inexplicable for you know, ancient peoples. And that's what I get out of it. But
oh yeah, it's absolutely mythological. It meets the I mean, I've mentioned before, but it's worth repeating. The criteria for something to be mythology is it gives you a how did we get here? Where did we come from?
Yep.
And then the relationship between God and humans, and then you finish off your myth with the destiny of mankind. And Genesis covers the first two. It vaguely alludes to the destiny part, but that's not what it's for. It's a creation myth.
Yeah.
That far, but it does seem that the sort of allegorical truth of the story leaves a lot to be desired. I'm told that maybe Adam and Eve died a sort of spiritual death, or mortality entered the world. But then we need to ask why it is that God had to proactively banish them from the Garden of Eden. This isn't a natural result of sin that, you know, mortality entered the world. They're banished. And the implication is that they could have just as easily reached out and eaten from the tree of life, but God didn't want this to happen. So he guards the gates of Eden with a cherubim, with a flaming sword. I find this quite strange, and I'd like to know what Dinesh thinks of it. Moving on quickly.
Dinesh does not look happy or comfortable. Can I just say, O'Connor is just he's so comfortable sort of discussing this thing. I kind of, I'm not sure why Dinesh D'Souza of all people. I feel like Dinesh is out of his league.
Oh yes.
He's debated sort of, you know, counter apologists and other sort of political opponents, but you're in the room with an academic who devotes their time to analyzing why and logically thinking. You are, you know, it's like I disagree with Alex O'Connor over vegetarianism or veganism, you know, not eating animals, but I'd be hesitant to go into a debate with him. I still would, but I would be hesitant as well. Like, seriously.
Yeah, for
getting
sure.
a lot of compliments for your hat, Ember. I have to agree. It's lovely. Absolutely love it. I love the purple roses.
I'm so glad. I wanted to look fancy for our Alex O'Connor thing. Actually, it's a Marsha P. Johnson tribute. It was a thing that she did every day she could. She slept under a table in a flower shop during that period when she was homeless. Some mornings they'd give her the leftover flowers, and she'd make a little flower crown out of them. Some mornings she actually had the money to buy her own, and so every day she could, she'd make a flower crown. And when they made I think it was a bust they made of her in tribute after the fact, it had like slots in it to put flower stems, so you could give her a real flower crown on the statue. Pretty neat.
Sorry for a sec. I knew that name. I had to look it up. She was the activist at the Stonewall riots that demonstrated, and
one of many, but she was
very
well known for that. So I'm like, I'm gonna do that. And you know, I have to wear hats, but I can put a flower crown around the hats.
Yeah, why not?
That's right. Yeah.
Opposed to the events of the later Old Testament, skipping over Exodus, we're introduced to another form of truth that I want to potentially engage in, and that's the concept of moral truth. That's another one that I spoke about in the beginning just there, the concept of moral truth. When we look at some of the military conquests of the Old Testament, bear in mind that the Promised Land pledged to Abraham is not an empty plain. Its indigenous inhabitants had to be, shall we say, displaced by a series of military campaigns ordered by God and carried out by his prophets. Thus, we have such commands as in Deuteronomy, chapter 20. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. Sounds promising to start with. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. Some peace. If they refuse to make peace and engage you in battle, which, why would they do that on these terms? Lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, and the livestock, and everything else in the city, they get to go... No, sorry, hold on. You may take these as plunder for yourselves, that's right. And you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. Likewise, in 1 Samuel, we have the destruction of the Amalekites.
Yeah, so this is sort of a tactic slash I mean, it's a very common occurrence. The Mongol Empire used to do basically the same, right? It's not something that is uncommon in those times. It's sort of, you go up to a city and you go, well, surrender and become sort of servants to us. You know, obviously we would call them slaves, you know, because they would be forfeiting all of their property, everything they have, but they would get to live. Or we kill everybody. If you try to resist, if you put up a fight, we're going to absolutely slaughter everybody. And that, you know, the Mongols did that, you know, roughly one millennium later. It wasn't unheard of. Absolutely not. And sort of this sort of ultimatum of resist and die or submit and live, I would kind of argue that even Islam is guilty of that.
Oh yeah, it's very, very effective.
Yeah. Because even if they don't, like, because it you know, it helps you with if you know, if they surrender, then you've just gotten a whole bunch of stuff for no problem whatsoever. Even if they resist, it sort of, you know, sort of overwhelms their confidence that, hey, if we fail, everything's lost. You know, it sort of undermines their confidence in a way. So it's a very brutal tactic. But
yeah,
yes,
it's psychological warfare. It's kind of advanced in that way, because it's like saying the goal is to have vassal states, to take over territory and property and have power without losing your own soldiers. But if you flip the script and present it to the enemy as in, well, we really want to just kill you all. We just want to wipe you off the face of the earth. But our God says we need to be nice. So if you surrender now, take advantage of this limited time offer for only 5 easy payments of $99.95, you can be our slaves.
Yep. And it sort of promotes people switching sides or betraying their people or opening the gates and saying, hey, but don't kill me, I submitted, kind of thing. It promotes that kind of stuff. But in the long term, it's not good. This is the thing, like short-term thinking, it's fantastic because they capitulate, but you end up with a whole bunch of people in, you know, as vassals and subservient people that don't like you. You know, that really don't like you.
You do set up the possibility for rebellions in future generations, but there's ways to minimize the threat. This is one of the reasons that Rome was always at war. When they got a new vassal state who you know, was paying tribute, part of the tribute was soldiers, the people who were of fighting age and ability. They would take them into the legions, and then when they invade the next country, those guys were on the front line. So you're effectively depleting the potential rebels' army in service to your own goals.
Yeah, and they were very good about it, because then if they, you know, they would be depleted, but also that the winners would conquest other lands and get, you know, loot and be rewarded for it, kind of thing. So Rome would be turning them into vassal states subservient to Rome, like, because if they're treated well under Rome, they'll like being under Rome. So that's how they expanded. But it's sort of, it's very, you know, Rome famously overextended and grew too big, you know, and it really wasn't good in the long term. But, you know, Rome lasted a long time. So I guess maybe it is a tactic that is tried and true. But yeah, but this is the great moral guide for people, you know, how to extort your enemies to surrender through
the
pain of
lessons
death
passed down through history.
Right, how to use the sword to extort your enemies out of everything they own and become slaves to you. Nice moral lessons, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
There's the order, now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. I'm told sometimes that this is actually an exercise in hyperbole. God didn't mean everyone. It continues, do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. And if you think that this is hyperbole, consider what happens when Saul does conduct the destruction of the Amalekites as ordered and decides to leave alive the king as well as some of the best of the livestock. He leaves them alive. For this small act of mercy, God responds by saying to the prophet Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king because he's turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. So not even the animals can escape this genocide. So I'd like to ask Dinesh, I suppose, directly, which is it? Is this a morally corrupt series of events, or do I have to dispel with my moral intuition that genocide, including of innocent children, is a bad thing?
Moral intuition. Look, I'll skip it. I have doubts about moral intuition and where that comes from. I think our moral intuitions are largely a product of our upbringing, to be honest with you. I really think so. And the more and more I think about it, I think there's people who are brought up with things that my moral intuition would absolutely balk at. Right? I don't know.
I think Alex is trying to contextualize it in the terms of our morality. Like Dinesh is making the argument this is morally true. So from our perspective, is it morally true? Because there's no question. The ancient Hebrews, right from the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder your fellow Israelites. Everyone else is fair game.
Well, I don't think there is. I don't think there's any moral facts. I don't think there's any moral truths. I think, not moral truths as you would use truth, kind of thing. That which comports with reality. I'm a moral anti-realist, so I don't think there is any morals that are real to have moral truths of. But I think contextually, if you're saying, hey, is it true that this is immoral? We're talking normative, like our morals, which I totally get. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's talking about, intuitively to all of us, slaughtering and genociding an entire people is absolutely immoral and horrendous. Absolutely. But I mean, to the people at the time, it wasn't morally bad at all. It was morally just because
I think they would. Well, it depends on who you ask, right? Like if you ask the barbarian tribes coming out of the deserts with a war god's banner, to them, there's no problem with it. It's kill or be killed out here. But to the relatively civilized Canaanite peoples in their city-states, they'd be like, the reason there wasn't a Canaanite empire is because they didn't believe in total war. There were wars, just like there were wars in Greece and Egyptian during unification over there and so on and so forth. But they wouldn't kill everyone because that's pretty stupid.
Yeah, and sort of the idea that Samuel sort of said, well, no, I'm not going to kill everybody as God has commanded. That obviously it wasn't intuitive at that point. Obviously killing the women and children still wasn't intuitive. If God has to command it and, force his people to do it, was it intuitive at all? Because if it was intuitive, you wouldn't have to be commanded to do it. It would be just something you did. So I'm not sure. You are just a young man. Oh, this is hilarious. Zaya Dali, you are just a young man. Your ages look like born in 1990. Why, thank you. You need enough time to reach the knowledge of the religious conception, yet you are a raw young man so far. Thank you. That's so nice. Wow. Did they just say that I look like 30, 34?
34-ish, yeah. Give or take a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Just FYI, I was born in 76.
Yeah, Mark's older than I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had the same thing. I was like, when I found out, I was like, no way, because you do look so young. Like,
oh, thank you.
I've got permanent bags under my eyes and eyeball wrinkles, and you're like smooth, not just on the top of your head, but like, I don't know.
I was about to say, are you looking at my head again? Look, thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't know. It's probably just a genetic thing. My brother's the same. He looks really young as well. It's probably just a genetic thing, you know. But yes, I am 47 this year, I believe. So yeah, doing well. Doing well. Thank you.
There's plenty more to talk about in that regard. I don't want to take up too much time. This isn't, of course, to mention the advocacy and explicit instructions around slavery in the Old Testament. Hopefully we can get onto those too, if we want to go down the moral path. But I think that the most natural interpretation of the question is the concept of historicity, the literal truth of the Bible, that is. This is where I think we have to move to the New Testament, because the genre of the Gospel seems to be historical biography, unlike the mythology of a book like the Psalms or Genesis or Job. And here there's a lot to talk about. We begin with the birth narratives. There are two birth narratives in the Gospels, in Matthew and Luke. Both give different accounts. Both have a genealogy of Jesus, for example, but the genealogies are different. I'm told this is because one records Mary's genealogy and one records Joseph's. You can do this if you like. It doesn't seem like the most natural reading of the text if you're not already predisposed to synchronize the accounts. Then we have, for example, the flight to Egypt, which is only recorded in Luke, which is difficult to reconcile with Matthew's account that they went to the temple in Jerusalem instead. But more importantly, Matthew then says that the family traveled to Nazareth, and he says, "So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he shall be called a Nazarene," quoting the prophets. Now, you'll notice if you read an online Bible that where the Old Testament prophets are quoted, there's a little footnote telling you what the prophecy is. In this case, you won't find one, because the prophecy simply doesn't exist. It's not there. There's no such thing. So there are two options.
Note on that, though. It's true that in no version of the Bible we currently have is there such a prophecy. However, we have lost a lot of books. As for one example, there's another book in the Old Testament. I forget the book offhand, but it's Numbers King, somewhere in that general region. It's one king of the Israelites speaking to other people, referring to scripture in a book that is no longer in the Bible. It's lost to history.
Right.
So
Right.
even the main canonical texts have lost books over time. So it could have been a real prophecy that Luke was referencing, but
Matthew.
maybe he just made it up. We don't know, but it could have been real.
Yeah, so it's in Matthew, actually. He says that he will be called, he quotes a prophecy saying he will be called a Nazarene, and quotes the prophecy. But we can't find the prophecy. But I guess the whole point is, and what the crux of the matter is that if God had these prophecies to show that Jesus was the Son of God and the fulfiller of all these things, why would he let this prophecy be lost?
Mm-hmm.
How does
Mike
that
Winger
work?
did a video about that at one point, because there's a movement within younger Christians to throw out the entire Bible. The same way the Protestants threw out the Catholic Church and went Bible only. Now there are Christians saying we don't even need the damn Bible, which is, you can make a theological argument for. The first Christians didn't have the Bible either.
Right.
You could. But Mike Winger's idea was you can't do that, because once you accept Jesus reaches out and grabs the whole Old and New Testaments, because he's constantly referencing Psalms and Isaiah and such. And his story is told in the Gospels and Paul's letters. So by Mike Winger's thinking, it should not be possible for a book to be lost. And yet we know they have been. We know it from outside the Bible, too. Historians like Tacitus, I think, references a book called Mark that is definitely not the Mark we have today.
Well, we don't know if Mark is Mark. That's the whole
Mark
point.
Is definitely not Mark.
Yeah, we call it Mark, but is Mark the one that we definitely know is not written by Mark? Yeah, I think you're right.
All four of them. So the first gospel is the only one that conceivably could have been written by one of the original 12, because it was early enough that they may have still been alive. The others definitely not. They're well past the expiration date of mortals with a normal lifespan. But
sorry, go ahead.
It's all right. It definitely was not. I forget the exact rationale. Bart Ehrman does a long breakdown on this in one of his videos. but
Yes.
it's very clear from the details that are presented in the story. I think possibly even the genealogy, and the way the story is written and presented, especially without the long ending, that it's basically just verbal tradition, the same thing that gave us the
Yeah.
Old Testament in the first place.
Yeah, and you've got to ask because and you bring up Mark, which is really interesting because Mark is the one with a long ending and a short ending,
Mhm.
and the long ending, almost every single scholar, biblical scholar, says yes, the long ending was added by the church, like into the past Jesus's life. That's the one about true Christians being able to handle snakes and drink poison kind of thing, which is the reason why Pentecostals get into hospital so often, because they think this is true. But biblical scholars will say no, that was added by the early church fathers later on. So it sort of begs the question: well, did these prophecies exist, or did, say, Mark allude to a prophecy that was added later retroactively, like sort of to say, hey, Mark may have said he will be called a Nazarene and reference this prophecy, and someone inserts it into the Old Testament when the Bible was compiled, kind of thing. We don't know. This is the problem, because we don't have any of the originals. Now, that's incredibly unlikely because of the Dead Sea Scrolls and all of that kind of thing. But it is possible that Mark never made any prophecies as well, and that was inserted by the early church fathers, that they reference this Nazarene. It is possible that's happened. How do we know? We don't have the originals, any of them. So, and we know that parts of the text were definitely added by the early church fathers, and that's why the Bible is not reliable. They'll sort of the apologists will sort of say, "Oh, the Bibles are the most reliable, book we've ever had," and that is demonstrably not true.
Mm-hmm. What's that one Bible? The Wicked Bible, where the printer left out a word in the commandments, so it ended up saying, "Thou shalt commit adultery."
I think it was in Red Dwarf. They had his parents were like Seventh Day Hoppers, and the passage that said and most important of these things is hope. There was a misprint, so it said the most important was hop, and that was particularly funny. Actually, yeah. The Red Dwarf books. I mean, the English series was fantastic, but the books were actually hilarious as well. You know, really funny.
Yeah. Either Matthew made up this prophecy or got it wrong, in which case the New Testament is mistaken, or the prophecy does exist, but for some reason fell out of our scriptural tradition and now no longer exists, which makes the accuracy and at least the completeness of the Old Testament suspect. So again, I'd like to ask directly which it is. Finally, I suppose I should mention the contradictions that a lot of people point to in the Gospels. Some of these, I think, are legitimate, some are not. I'll give you some examples very quickly of Gospel contradictions that I do think are real contradictions. First, the date of Jesus' crucifixion. Was it before the Passover, as John states, or was it after the Passover, as the Synoptic Gospels state? Second, Jesus is sending out his disciples to teach. In Mark, he tells them to take nothing with them except a staff. In Matthew and Luke, he says, take nothing with them, including no staff. So do they take a staff or do they not? A pedantic contradiction, but a contradiction nonetheless, and one that's led people like Barnabas, Ahern, to write entire articles on this. And Augustine himself actually distinguished between a literal staff and a metaphorical staff to explain.
Oh, that is some backflipping if ever I've heard one.
Yeah.
Like he says to them, take a staff, the other says, don't take a staff, and you're like, well, one is spiritual. I'm sorry, what?
Oh yeah, Augustine was like the original Frank Turek. The way he can tap dance around questions. I learned about him for the first time in my Philosophy 101 class, because besides being a top shelf apologist grifter, he was also a master of rhetoric in a time when there weren't universities to confer that kind of degree on anyone, which means you have to get other masters to agree that you're a master. And he was very, very good. But with apologetics, I think he approached it because it was a challenge. Like, politics is super easy. Let's try to reconcile the staff, no staff thing. If I can come up
Right.
with bullshit that people buy about this, then I'm good at this, you know?
I haven't heard this one. I haven't heard this one at all. Which is odd. This stuff and no stuff. I'm gonna have to look that up. That's interesting.
In this difference, anything, I suppose, except considering the possibility of even the most minor of gospel contradictions. Third, Jesus flipping the tables at the temple. A famous story, but did you know that in the Gospel of John, this takes place at the beginning of Jesus' ministry? In the Synoptics, it takes place near the end. So when did that occur? Mary Magdalene, after the resurrection of Jesus, runs to the disciples in John's Gospel and says, they've taken the Lord, and we do not know where they have put him. Strange thing for her to say if, as the Gospel of Matthew recounts, she's visited by an angel at the tomb who tells her exactly where Jesus is going, and then she's met by Jesus herself on the way to the disciples to bring them the news.
Yep.
Strange for her to then say they've taken.
I was aware of that one. Yeah. It's sort of, and then they'll say, oh no, it's not a contradiction. And you're like, how can that possibly be the case? How is that the case? And they argue perspective, and they argue lack of information, and they argue all kinds of things, but it is a contradiction. Those things cannot both be true. They can't be.
Well, if I were to put on an apologist hat, I don't have a hat ugly enough to do that, unfortunately. Maybe I should get one. But I might argue that the shock of seeing both an angel and a resurrected Jesus wiped her memory.
Okay. All right.
Excusegetics.
In the Lord, and we do not know where they've put him. There's more to say on this. Interpolations, things which seem not to be in our oldest manuscripts, but end up in newer manuscripts of the New Testament, such as the adulterous woman, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Most scholars agree that this was not in our earliest manuscripts and was added in at a later date. And if we can see that the gospel stories were edited after they were written down, there's no reason to think that they couldn't be edited before they were written down as oral traditions too, as well as the entire ending of Mark 16. There's a longer version.
In fact, to add on to that,
yeah,
even if they weren't edited after they were written down, that still doesn't preclude any editing during the telephone game part of their history. Also,
because they
unrelated,
are oral histories.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know, I mean, they were all fishermen, for fuck's sake. Of course they're going to do the fisherman thing, and the fish gets bigger and bigger as you retell the story. That's why they're Okay, they're not all fishermen, but you know what I mean. But unrelated, I want to point out that there's a very large book at the bottom of that table. It's not a Bible. There is no Bible here for some reason, and not to spoil anything, but I want to point it out because that does become important later. The lack of a Bible here for these guys.
Okay. Neither of them have a phone they can Google. I mean, resources are online.
Isn't in our earlier manuscripts. These documents don't seem to have the historical reliability either. So, in conclusion, I've probably spoken for too long here. Are we talking about allegorical truth, moral truth, metaphorical, theological truth, historical truth? I suppose what I want to say to Dinesh is take your pick, and I'll probably have something to say about it.
Actually, he's coming under time. He said 10 minutes, and I think it started at 14 or so. So he's not doing too badly, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for eyeballing it especially.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's weird because you don't have a moderator. Like, even if the moderator is sort of, because the moderator really, you are priming them with what you expect to have. Like, mostly if you're just saying, hey, have at it, people, and all he's doing is keeping time, that's the moderator's job. Like, it needn't be this whole idea of, oh, well, you've got to play as referee in like an MMA match. That's not necessarily the case. It's just really weird that nobody's keeping time or doing anything in this debate. But, Alex pointed that out earlier. It is a bit of an odd one for a debate. It's more like a, when Matt Delahunty sat down and had a discussion with Jordan Peterson.
That's what I was thinking too, which was also a Penguin production. I think they figured that went well. They'll try the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Oh, he does not look confident. I got to say, he does not look confident. Just the body language. He doesn't seem comfortable.
He's fidgety. He's pausing to take a drink as his time starts instead of while Alex was wrapping up. He's still trying to buy time. Not to be that we can read micro expressions type person.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
way he's kind of folding his arms in, the one arm especially, in towards himself, he's like preparing to shield himself. He's not ready to explode with facts and knowledge. He's kind of cringing a little.
Well, it's just Alex looks very comfortable and relaxed, and he doesn't. That's all I was thinking. But I could be wrong. He could be perfectly comfortable. I don't submit to that whole body language thing either. It can be. I mean, really, you're just looking at what you're presenting to people. People do read body language. They absolutely do. It doesn't accurately convey your emotions, but they'll definitely make assumptions on it. When you're sitting in a job interview, if you're confident and relaxed, it will come across. If you're fidgety and not relaxed at all, they will make assumptions. Like, the person who's relaxed and confident could be nervous and fidgety. They're just not showing it. It doesn't accurately describe, but people will definitely make assumptions about your mental state from your body language. So if you are doing debate, definitely pay attention to that, like what you're conveying with your sort of body language there.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand up. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay. I'm standing up because I want to.
That's a mistake. Like, asking for his permission to do that, it doesn't make you look that strong. Fair enough. I think he's he's more comfortable standing, and he doesn't want to offend his opponent. What would be a better way to do that?
Maybe discuss it beforehand. I don't know.
Yeah, discuss it beforehand, or just say, I'm going to stand. Do you have any objection? Then it's more like,
it's still polite.
I'm doing this thing. Is there anything you object to about it? And then you're not asking for permission. You're just saying, hey, feel free to raise an objection. I think that's a better way of doing it, just a more confident way. But, we're talking about little things in debate, semantics, really.
Kind of neutralize Alex's accent advantage. I mentioned this book.
Good. He starts with a joke. Very good. It was actually quite funny. I found it humorous. So, yeah. Come on, points where points are due.
It seems to me no accident that so many of the prominent so-called new atheists have British accents. I think this is really important to their credibility, because think of it, if Hitchens and Dawkins and Alex were three Southern boys from Louisiana, would they have quite the same impact? I'm not sure. Anyway, this is why I'm standing.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to give him credit, because it's almost funny, but then he just goes with it and rambles, and like opening with an irrelevant ramble, not a great look. And even though they're going by a loose 10 minutes, he's still wasting time, which it shows more weakness, because he's clearly stalling to get to a point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And plus, I mean, the problem is that in the Roman Empire, Jesus and the other people were Southern boys from Alabama. Metaphorically speaking, they were people on the sort of the rural side, or the less populated side, and not educated, not you know what I mean. Like, the whole point is that Jesus wasn't the sort of part of the academia and the normative, the Pharisees and things like that. He wasn't part of that section of society. He was sort of a person of the people, according to the text.
He was a smelly hippie.
Boy. Exactly. So I think it's just, No, I agree, Jake. He gave away the ground with the joke landed for me. I mean, it wasn't like laugh out loud, but it certainly was that, humorous icebreaker, just make a thing. And then he just lost it, like just threw it away immediately, which is terrible. Yeah, no, I'm with you, Jake. I am.
About this topic and kind of how to get at it, because I've never debated this topic before. I'm not a theologian. I wouldn't even say I'm an expert in the Bible. I'm, I think, a believing and intelligent Christian. And so I have done a bunch of debates over the existence of God, over can God's omnipotence and
Wow, he's still stalling. He's still stalling. And he's sandbagging. So if you don't know what sandbagging is, I know this from gaming. I'm not sure if there's a different term in debate or whatever. But sandbagging is where you essentially put all of these excuses on yourself beforehand. Oh, I'm going to give this a try, but I'm really tired and my controller isn't working, and I'm really bad at this and all of this stuff, to minimize the impact if you don't perform well, right? So you can sort of go, oh, well, I told you I wasn't very good at this kind of thing. And everybody does it to a certain degree. I mean, I play a game and I'm like, oh man, I suck at this game, kind of thing. Everybody does it, but it doesn't make you look strong in a debate, because you're basically going, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've got no idea. I didn't prepare at all. I had nothing prepared,
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's also confirming his apologist credentials. He's opening with excuses.
Right. that took like a third of a second to drop. I'm like, right. Yes, he's but apologetics. Look, apologists apologize for God, not for themselves. Like
details.
Okay, details. Yeah. And another thing for those debate busts, who's he addressing? He's addressing the crowd. Do you notice Alex didn't do that? Alex was sitting down addressing like the crowd, but also him. He was bringing him into the conversation. He was sort of being inclusive of everybody. He wasn't ignoring Dinesh. I think that's important, because he kind of looks like he's just doing a speech at the moment, which is fine. It's just, I think Alex's approach of, hey, this is the discussion I want to have. Dinesh can address this. Dinesh can, it very is inclusive. But I'll see if he sort of does the same for Alex later on. But for the moment, sort of turning your back on your opponent and just doing the crowd work, it's probably where Dinesh feels more comfortable, is appealing to a crowd kind of thing, rather than having an intellectual conversation. Maybe he's intimidated.
He's a Tony Robinson style crowd speaker. But there's another factor in this too. And Dinesh may not be consciously doing this, but by the way he's presenting this, like, I've sat here and listened to you. Now you stay sitting down. I'm going to stand up and tell the crowd how it really is.
Right.
Like, you're out of the conversation now, little boy.
Well, I don't know if he's thinking that, but he definitely, I don't know. I feel like at a first glance he's intimidated. That's how I feel. But I could be wrong. You could be absolutely right. He could be sort of, just trying to intimate that, hey, this person isn't worth my time.
Benevolence, be reconciled with evil in the world. Those topics appear to be philosophical topics. But when you're dealing with the Bible, you have a different kind of a work altogether. And I say this because in discussing if something is true or false, you have to ask, what is it that the book is doing? Like, what's its purpose? What is it there for? Let's take an example of what I mean. Let's say if we were debating, is Shakespeare's Julius Caesar true or false? Now, Julius Caesar is a historical account. This is
it's how accurate to reality, as you said, what comports with reality. I kind of agree. Like the underlying context there is how Julius Caesar would represent the events that happened in actuality. Famously, Julius Caesar was stabbed. Do we know that actually happened? That is true?
Yeah, like how much of what Shakespeare wrote is historically accurate? Because, while you can have a historical biography on Caesar, that wasn't the purpose of Shakespeare's writing. I think Dinesh is trying to get to this, but I don't know how well he's going to do with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he brings up, I think Shakespeare's a really dangerous place to go to, because we know we have writings by Shakespeare like Richard III that we know weren't accurate. He painted Richard III as a hunchback and an evil man and all of these, and sort of, an ugly, sort of, mutated hunchback, and then we found portraits of him, and he wasn't. He like had scoliosis, but he wasn't all of the things that Richard III, the play, said he was. So we know that so Shakespeare especially took very strong artistic licenses, especially when somebody was paying him to. So, amazing playwright. I wouldn't go there for historical accuracy. And plus, we're talking more about supernatural stuff, so you might as well compare it to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, were all the fairies accurate? Okay. No, I don't think, Oberon is actually out there in the forest running around, personally.
Well, you can't prove he isn't.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Not one of Shakespeare's works of fiction. It's a historical drama. But because Shakespeare's...
I don't know about that, sir. That Julius Caesar Shakespeare's play is a historical drama. I think it would take some artistic license, as most plays at the time would. I don't know about that one. I think Shakespeare needs to have an asterisk on it based on real events, kind of thing. I think entertainment was really the main purpose, not accurate reporting of the events.
Mm-hmm. Got to sell those tickets.
Right, but considering that D'Souza has made movies like 2000 Mules about the election interference, that is maybe he has trouble distinguishing between actual events and entertainment, because he doesn't seem to recognize what truth is. Dinesh having problems with truth. Yeah, who would have guessed it?
Interest is in drama. He emphasizes dramatic events and dramatic confrontation. He does not actually worry about trivial details, anachronisms. If an event occurs over here, Shakespeare does not hesitate to pull it in over here because of the dramatic impact is more powerful this way. And
yeah, but but then we wouldn't call it true, right? Because when we're talking like, are the events of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar true? The context is, did they happen in reality? That's the implicit context. Like if we say, hey, are the events of 2000 Mules true? It's not, oh, well, the author pulled them in over here for, and messed them. No, we're saying, did they actually occur? I think he's been very squirrely on this one, to be honest with you.
So imagine if someone were to come along and say, well, this is untrue, because when one of the conspirators shows up to commit the crime, he is, according to Shakespeare, wearing a handkerchief. Well, handkerchiefs didn't really exist in the time of Julius Caesar. This is obviously something Shakespeare got right out of Shakespearean England, stuck it right in there, didn't care about doing that because his purpose is something else, to explore the nature of tyranny, for example. And so to bring the lens of saying this is anachronistic, well, you may or may not be right, but you're like missing the point of the whole book. And you're also missing the point of the author, and you're missing the point of the reader. Meaning the author's intention is not to worry about whether or not people in ancient Rome used handkerchiefs. The point of the author is to dramatize something about the essence of tyranny and conspiracy.
Well, that you've outlined a problem then, because people think that the Bible is infallible and have no contradictions. You've basically said, oh yeah, there's contradictions.
And it shouldn't be possible if it's infallible.
Correct. But it was the author's intention to change things in it. So the problem that you've opened up is how much has been changed. Because while we can sort of say, hey, there's other sources for Julius Caesar and we can get other information about him, for this, we're not relying on other sources that Julius Caesar exists. We don't have busts of Jesus that were made in the day. We don't have other texts that talk about Jesus. All we've got is this book. So if you're saying, hey, their intention was to provide some narrative, we can't trust that text anymore, because there is no other sort of way to confirm the events that happened, and no alternative resources to sort of say, okay, was this an actual event? What actually did happen? We're basically all just relying on one narrative. And you're basically saying, well, it's fine that it may not be accurate.
Also, I want to point out that Julius Caesar isn't about tyranny. Whether Dinesh didn't read it or doesn't remember it from high school, or he's just so consumed with the Christian nationalist idea that everything that isn't for him is tyranny, that's not really the point of the play. It's about men acting with honor versus men acting with ambition.
I haven't done a deep dive into it. I think I've sort of read it.
I mean, it's really, if you break it down, it comes down to argumentation and weaponizing philosophy in order to achieve a political goal. You know.
So I didn't think that he says tyranny, but I didn't think that Julius Caesar was the antagonist of that play. I thought he was sort of more the sort of protagonist that was portrayed by Brutus.
Yeah. Caesar was he acted completely honorably throughout. It was just the only time tyranny gets mentioned is when Brutus and Cassius are being talked into the conspiracy. It's mentioned that once Caesar becomes dictator for life, he won't be able to help but be a tyrant. Even if he doesn't want to be, it's not possible for a man with total power to not become a tyrant.
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of the corrupting of power kind of thing. And even good men can be corrupted by power. I didn't think, I guess, I don't know. Ooh.
Yeah.
Conspiracy, and maybe the conflict between tyranny and freedom. And readers of the work, understanding that, have always taken it in that spirit. So as I listen to Alex, I think to myself, let's think about the Bible, what kind of a book it is. Well, first of all, it is a book that exists sort of within a tradition and within a church. I mean, there was no Bible for 300 years, right? The early Christians get together in the 4th century, they put the Bible together. Now, there's already a flourishing church. In fact, right about that time, the Roman emperor will convert to Christianity. Christianity will become the state religion of Rome.
Yeah, he's talking about Constantine here. But wasn't he he's talking about the Eastern Roman Empire, isn't he? Like the one based out of that later became the Byzantium Empire, out of, Istanbul, Constantinople, for those history buffs that know that it's changed its name multiple times due to Christian and Islamic influence. So I think it's weird for him to jump off the season to such a late period of the sort of decay of Rome, and the sort of the Western Roman Empire fell apart and the Eastern Roman Empire kind of went strong for a little bit, but essentially didn't survive much better. As I said, it turned into the Byzantium Empire, as far as I know, anyway.
Yeah. It's, as they say, empires infamously don't last terribly long. Rome was remarkably successful. Of course, a big chunk of its time was in its republic phase before it became an empire. But empires fall quickly and fall hard, but they have long half-lives. That is to say, the remnants, the echoes of the empire persist for a very long time. I mean, even after Byzantium fell, the influence of Rome still echoes across Europe, and to a very great extent, even after the Roman Empire fell, because it set the church up as a semi-independent power, thanks to Constantine. The church controlled the kingdoms that rose out of the ashes of the empire for a very long time. It was effectively a spiritual version of the Roman Empire, because the kings couldn't do shit without the Pope's blessing.
Well, that was Constantine's aim, as far as I know. He wanted there to be a marriage between the church and the monarchy, essentially. Essentially, what we've got set up is a road to the aristocracy of feudalism, that the church and the executive, or the aristocrats, the aristocratic class are entwined. They are basically the same thing. And that's what Constantine kind of wanted. He wanted the church and the sort of secular, if you will, or the physical government to be absolutely entwined, which, I don't know, probably Dinesh wouldn't be too opposed to.
Literally, there were a lot of factors that caused what we call the Dark Ages, but that change definitely made them worse and made them last a lot longer than they had to.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, all of the events are incredibly complex and had a number of factors, but that absolutely did not help. Like the idea that the church would give the aristocrats legitimacy, and the aristocrats in turn would, their ultimate goal would be to protect the church. Just a horrible time, just a horrible time.
And the Bible will become, this assembled Bible will become the handbook of this church. And so it is to this day. Now, that's one point. The second point is that the Bible is a very strange book to be asking this kind of a question about, because the Bible nowhere admits the legitimacy of this kind of inquiry. It's worth noting. The Bible is a book of declaration.
You're telling me
of revelation.
For over 40 years, because I've been asking these questions since I was a little child and my grandmother kept trying to bring me to church. Every time I say, how do we know this thing is true? Most theists, and in fact many apologists, say because the book itself says it's true. So Dinesh is going to stand there and tell us that when the vast majority of believers say the book is true because the book says the book is true, he's going to say the book makes no such claims. Really? I'm starting to wonder if he paid as much attention to this thing as he did to Shakespeare.
Yeah. The Bible at multiple points says that it is true, or that the teachings of the disciples are the truth. I mean, even Jesus refers to as the truth, the way, and the life. You can't. I mean, what's he basically? Is he throwing the debate, basically saying, well, the book doesn't say that it's true? I mean, you're arguing on the proposition, is the Bible true? Like whether the book says it's true or not, it still makes claims that we can evaluate, to say, is that claim true or not? Like it still says that this is how the universe was created. This is how the earth was created. This is how humans were created. This is the events that unfolded circa 0 AD in the, Judea and a Roman province. Those are claims that it doesn't matter whether the book says this is true or this is not true. We can still evaluate whether those claims are true or not.
Yeah, I can't remember ever reading a physics textbook that says, by the way, everything in this book is true. Like, it doesn't matter if it asserts it or not. It's what's in it. Is it factually accurate?
Yeah, so this is a terrible argument. Like, it's almost like he's saying, well, we shouldn't even be asking that question. Then why are you up on a stage debating it? Weird.
It never tries to prove anything. It could, but with very rare exceptions, and even those exceptions are generally kind of feeble, it is a book of sort of bold proclamation. And
those proclamations are of things that occurred in reality. And they will be true or not true. I am baffled by his what he's going for. Just baffled. It proclaims things. Cool, are they true?
Beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Boom. It's declared as something true. Now,
and
what are we
wrong?
Yeah.
The very first line in the book, he did nail the quote. Absolutely, according to the New International Version sent to me by the lovely and wonderful Robin Webster. So I have a physical Bible to reference.
Nice.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Simple quote, easy to memorize. Factually not
Boom.
true. Demonstrably not true.
Yeah.
The Earth is not the same age as the whole rest of the universe.
Yes. Unless you to put the apologist hat on again, you basically say, oh, but he created the rest of the universe with age and Earth with not that much age, and sort of that lends to last Tuesdayism, where you're sort of like, well, everything could have been created last Tuesday. So yeah, but that's the whole point. He's sort of arguing, well, we're not, it shouldn't really be even asked whether it's true, but it makes this proclamation. Well, is that true? Of course you can ask if that is true. It is making a claim on the reality of the universe and the Earth, an ontological claim. So is it true? It absolutely can be asked. And as you said, as far as we know, no, it's not true. So, oh, wow.
I mean, we could go through these. We're not here for this, but we could go through these one by one. We have to go quite a ways before we find something that's even plausibly maybe true.
Right, absolutely.
I want to reflect on that for a moment. Before I do, let me say, if you think about that sentence by itself, it's a puzzle. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Obviously,
it's not a puzzle. How is it a puzzle?
What? Because Dinesh is confused, everyone must be confused?
What? It's a puzzle. What? How is it a puzzle?
That's the puzzle.
What?
Somebody is writing this. But who? No one was there. Except God. And yet, the sentence does not say in the beginning,
were you there?
Oh. I'm wondering which side he's on. Like, seriously. Yeah, no one was there, so no one could have witnessed this to write about it from a first person. Yeah. But that's not what we hear from creationists. We hear that the God inspired people to write this, that it came from God who was there. That's what we hear. But he's arguing, no, nobody was there. So it couldn't have possibly been an accurate representation. That it's not freaking true. That's why I'm wondering which side he's on, because he's basically saying, hey, nobody knew this actually happened, but they're writing it in first person. Wow. Yeah, I agree, Katina. He seems to be taking a page out of the Peterson playbook. Yeah, I agree. If you start saying, well, what is truth? What is that? Peterson always sort of has these things about words and doesn't stick to normative definitions. He's terrible.
Created the heavens and the earth. There's apparently an observer. And the observer is recording, and God is in fact in the narrative. God is in fact the subject of it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So as I think about this statement, I think that first of all, it is an astounding claim, completely counterintuitive. And by counterintuitive, I mean, well, I get most of my intuitions from Aristotle. Aristotle, using you could call it philosophical common sense, says the universe has always been around. It's always been here. You don't need an explanation for how it got started because it never got started.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that Aristotle is, particularly great to go to when it comes to cosmology. But I don't get his point.
Why would that be intuitive? Like, yes, from a skeptical position, it's easier to explain. Like, say, oh, well, you ask what began the universe, because everything we see and observe has a beginning. A tree begins, the acorn sprouts, etc. So what began the universe? Well, consider it critically, consider it skeptically. Do we have any reason to assume that the universe did have a beginning? We don't know. It doesn't go back forever. So why do we need an explanation?
Well, I don't think Aristotle sort of said, Aristotle, let's face it, he didn't understand what the universe was. Like, I think he sort of said, we don't question that the universe is here. The universe doesn't mean anything. I think he's sort of saying, hey, we don't question that reality is here. Like overcoming the problem of solipsism, like that other people exist. we kind of just intuitively know that there's things around us, that we don't have to prove them, kind of thing. But this is wild in its sort of, he's basically saying, hey, there was no one to witness this. Okay, but you're claiming it's true.
Yeah, well, he's setting up something of a red herring flavored straw man, because he's saying, going with Aristotle, the known great thinker's intuitions, we might say that the universe has always existed. But the Bible says otherwise, and yada, yada, yada. It's not, it's only seems to be a gotcha if you first build that straw man. So
But I mean, Aristotle, but his argument of Aristotle saying that the universe has always been here works against his case, because he's saying that God created the universe early on, which is not what Aristotle sort of is saying, according to him. So that works against him, not for him.
Only if he stays on Aristotle. I think he's only using Aristotle as a straw.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's always existed. And the Greeks also believed, as you probably know, out of nothing can come nothing. So therefore, if you first had nothing, how can you get a universe? The Bible goes against this Greek tradition and states categorically, as a matter of fact, that first there was nothing, and then there was a universe because God made it.
I suppose the ancient Canaanites read Aristotle. Were they aware of the Greek philosophy at the time when they came up with their mythology? Because Dinesh is posing it as if they were aware of this common ancient knowledge that the great thinkers of Greece produced and deliberately opted to go against it. Because truth matters.
And let's face it, there wasn't nothing according to your worldview. There was God, right? It wasn't like the universe came from nothing.
It wasn't even just God. When we first join the Holy Spirit in the narrative, he's floating all over the waters. Where did the waters come from? Oh, the surface of the deep. I misspoke.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Even if because I get creation ex nihilo is out of nothing, right? So God creates the universe from nothing. Basically, he creates it, sort of. From something that wasn't there, he created something that was. It came out of nothing. But that doesn't mean that nothing was all that existed. God had to exist at that point as a sort of internal critique. So him saying there was nothing, no, that's not true. There was God. And you're right, the deep. And I think it does allude to waters, because it goes into the waters of the deep later on. But,
yes. And also there's the historical connection that the Genesis account of creation, we know from history and from archaeological artifacts that have been left behind, is a direct beat-for-beat ripoff of the creation myth of the Babylonians, when Marduk did battle with Tiamat, the personification of the chaos and the waters, and Marduk, after slaying Tiamat, cut the corpse in half, and made part the waters above and part the waters below, and created the land, and so on and so forth. It was a sort of one-upmanship. When the Jews were brought to Babylon, that's when they were exposed to this creation story, and they said, well, your God may be cool, but our God did all the same things in the same order without having to use a sword. He did it with just a word, so our God is better. Checkmate. Pantheists.
Well, they pantheists.
The Babylonians had many gods.
Yeah, well, that's not pantheist. That's polytheism.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but at the time they were polytheists as well, because of
details.
And
So there are some factual assertions here. The assertion that the universe had a beginning, the assertion that the universe, in a sense, came out of nothing, and of course the assertion that the universe was created by God. So we can, if we want to go down this road, I'm not going to do it right now, explore whether this astounding claim that was made by the ancient Jewish writers, with no evidence at all, no empirical investigation, no scientific experiment, No attempt to measure the redshift of galaxies. No.
Whose side is this guy on? No
He thinks
empirical
this
evidence.
is a good point.
This claim, with no evidence supporting it and no reason to believe it's true. What the hell is this man doing? What are you doing?
Also, minor nitpick, but the ancient
Yeah.
Hebrews were not Jewish scholars. Jew,
No, that's
of
right,
course,
yeah.
refers to Judea, which did not exist yet at this point.
Yeah, so they were Israelite, and they weren't really scholars. You didn't really have scholars back in that day. I mean, you had the priesthood, which were the closest thing, but they were Israelite priests, not really scholars as such. I'm not even sure that would apply at that point.
And they were too busy sprinkling dove blood on altars and juggling the right flavor of incense.
Yeah, and forcing women to swallow dust potions to get abortions and things like that. Yeah, and worrying if their clothes match the requirements of the Bible, I might add.
The ancient Hebrew writer says, we know this to be true because God told us. And now here we are, more than 2,000 years later, really more like 3,000 years later, and we're in a position to ask, is this claim true? So I'll defer that. I'm happy to discuss that, and probably will. But this is one way to think about whether what the Bible says is true. It's making these categorical assertions. And most of these assertions, I would argue, are in the domain of revelation. The Bible is, in fact, a revelation. A revelation.
But is it true?
Right?
Damn it, Dinesh. Yeah, I mean, I can take drugs and have visions. That doesn't mean the visions are true because I had a vision. Ay, ay, ay.
And when I was younger, I did take drugs and see visions, and I saw all kinds of stuff. I saw a bridge turn into a worm and crawl away, across the city. It was not true that was happening. It was just my brain chemistry was changed. That's all. That's all. Like, it seems to have this thing of, well, it was true that they wrote about it. That means Harry Potter is true. That means Lord of the Rings is true because somebody can. That means that
Lord of the Rings is true on a spiritual level.
On a spiritual level, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, so he's basically saying, hey, they had these revelations, therefore it's true. But that means that, Helter Skelter is true. It means that anybody writing any sort of manifesto is true that claims to have a revelation from God is true. That's ridiculous. That's stupid.
Yeah, that means that every holy book is true. The Vedas, the Quran, the Mayan inscriptions, all true.
Yeah, all true.
Simultaneously.
And that can't be the case because they are contradictory. They make contradictory claims. So when we're looking at is it true, we're looking at is it true in reality? But they can't all be. They can't be. They can't. Unless he's using some other definition of truth, which I presume that he is. But really unconvincing, and he's sort of done more harm for his case than good, because he sort of said, hey, there's no evidence for it. No, we can't test it anyway. We can't see if it's true. I thought he was angling for, well, it's a pointless question because we can't tell if it's true or not. But no, it's worse than that. It's so much worse.
Here we have a problem, because how does one approach a revelation philosophically? Alex, you just tell me when I'm out of time. Okay, I'm just going to go until you stop me.
Oh, don't stop him. Oh, no, don't stop him at all. Like, if I was Alex, I would let him go for as long as possible. It's obvious he's saying that because he doesn't want to do this. Like, I think he doesn't seem confident to me. But if I was Alex, I would go have at it. Give that man enough rope. Seriously. Give him all the rope he wants. Because at the moment, he's made a compelling case why not to believe that the Bible is true in any sense of the word.
Yeah. And to answer his question, the Bible does give us a way to test the veracity of revelation. It outright says, there will be people who come to you and speak prophecy in my name. You will know by their fruits if they're false or not. Because if what they say does not come to pass, they're false prophets.
Right.
You know, like Jesus's prediction that the world would end before that generation passed from this life.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. So according to the Christian's own internal scripture, Jesus was a false prophet.
Three minutes, I think.
I'm okay?
3 minutes or so.
I got 3 minutes. Oh, wow. It's just getting started. All right. I'll say.
Okay, can I just say the look on his face there was just hilarious? I just want to watch that again.
Alex, you just tell me when I'm out of time. Okay, I'm just going to go until you stop me.
3 minutes, I think.
I'm okay?
3 minutes or so.
I got 3 minutes. Oh, wow. It's just getting started.
I was just going, yeah, and you seem so comfortable up there.
Mm-hmm.
I was just getting started. Yeah,
the urge to analyze the fuck out of everything. Like the way he's covering his mouth. Sometimes people do that out of anxiety, but sometimes people do that because they are unconsciously presenting what they just said was a lie, and they're like hiding for it. It's a whole thing, but we don't want to get into that nonsense. I'll start wanting to measure his skull shape.
Just to go back to something he said as well, was that he said a major point is that no one was there. You have this first person sort of account of things, but we know that nobody was there except for God, who's being referenced. And he sort of, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Then why bring it up in the debate? It always, it's not terrible in all circumstance. It certainly can be good if you are tangential to a main point and you say, hey, there is also this other thing, I don't have time for it, but I could go into it. But he really made that a central aim and then went, but I'm not going to get into it. It kind of, I kind of wonder at these in a debate where somebody brings up something that's central to their point and then they say, but I'm not going to get into it, I don't have time to get into it right now, kind of thing. It's like, well, why bring it up? Like, why bring it up at all?
He's kind of the worst apologist in this respect, because this is a thing that Frank Turek does infamously well, Alyssa Childers to some extent. Greg Koukl is also a great one at it. In fact, Greg Koukl teaches his apostles specifically how to dodge questions. There was one video I did a while back where a caller called in and said, all my friends are atheists, I'm a Christian, how do I convert them? And Koukl says something to the effect of, well, they're going to want to know why they should believe. Don't answer that. Instead, ask a different question and move the topic where you want it to go.
Wow.
The best apologists, the most popular ones anyway, are experts at dodging questions. Whereas Dinesh is doing the opposite. He's walking straight into brick walls.
Yeah.
All right, I'll save some of my stuff, but let me just say this.
I'll save some of my stuff. Don't bother. What are you doing?
He's an experienced debater. He's laying out the points he's going to expound on throughout the course of the debate in a logical order. Oh, wait, no, he's doing the opposite of that, isn't he?
Right. Like, you had time to prepare for this. You're wandering around basically saying how you could make all of these amazing points, but you're not gonna. That's what I'm seeing. Now, that just might be my perspective, but that's what I'm seeing. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. He's unprepared. He's not giving a systematic. Think about what O'Connor did. He put down a list of points. Okay, first we address what kind of truth we're talking about. Then goes into problems with saying that the Bible is true, to the lists of some of the contradictions that he wants to discuss, to just a very well-ordered, systematic way of saying, hey, this is the things that we've got to go through. This is the things I want to discuss. These are the main problems I see. And bam, he's got a systematic way. What is this man doing? I don't know. He's struggling.
What is the point of revelation at all? You know, we have a guy here who says he's a cosmic skeptic. Many of you probably think you're skeptics.
What was that?
I think he's trying to mock the idea of skepticism. You can't be skeptical of God. God says so.
But just okay, that's definitely what he's doing. I gotcha, and he's probably going to go there. But cosmic skeptic, what he's trying to do is sort of poison the well. He's trying to say, hey, he's just a YouTuber. No, he's not just a YouTuber. He's a trained philosopher. Stop. No.
And a theologian. Is a theological degree that outranks
he's got
Dinesh's.
a theology degree.
Double degree from Oxford.
Oh, really? Amazing. No, Alex O'Connor, you can disagree with him all you want, but you can't sort of just go, oh, well, he's just cosmic skeptic. Well, yeah, that was his original channel name. So what? Like, it's just sort of, I feel like he's trying to angle for an ad hominem, like, you know, or poisoning the well. You shouldn't believe him. He's just a YouTuber. Wow.
And so you might ask, well, why the heck do we need revelations? We have reason. Well, turns out that here we are, flung into the world. And if we reflect upon this fact and reflect upon our place in the world, several important questions pop out.
You know what? If this was a rap battle, I'd be like, he's joking. He's joking. You know what I mean? Like, this reminds me of 8 Mile, where they're doing the rap battle and they just can't think of anything to say, and they, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, he's got to lose himself in the music, in the moment. Yeah.
Gonna never let you go. You only get one shot, Dinesh. You only get one shot. Don't miss your chance to blow. Dinesh has mum spaghetti right now. Like, seriously. Dinesh, what are you doing?
I could use some mum spaghetti.
You had time to prepare for this, and it's probably one of the most important debates of your career. And you're blowing it. Damn.
That are the inevitable result of reason, but which reason is utterly incapable of answering. Not that reason hasn't answered to date. Reason cannot answer.
Is it
I'm dying to hear this.
Is it true? So whether the events of the Bible are true, reason is incapable of answering that.
Oh no, he's got certain questions. He's saying reason leads us to certain questions that reason itself cannot answer.
Like? Yeah, okay. Well, let's find out.
What are these questions? 1, why is there a world? 2,
we can answer that one.
And
we can answer that in several different ways. Just to go with the cosmology route, because that's my thing. When two solar systems love each other very much. Our solar system accreted out of the remains of a second population supernova. Little bits and particles, they got together, and eventually they reached a configuration where gravity made them stick, and then rocks started smashing into that, and then more rocks, and then bigger rocks, and eventually something the size of Mars walloped the amalgamation and shot out debris that coalesced into the moon, and there's still rocks hitting us. Look at the Barringer crater. I mean, we can answer that, yes.
So accretion is the short answer, or maybe gravity is the short answer of why the world exists. Just basically gravity is why it exists. It's because things of mass will attract towards one another, and that forms
exactly. We even have math about this. Dr. Tapioca was showing me a model he worked on in grad school that shows that a single gravitational point, like a star, will still generate resonances within its planetary nebula that work sort of like Lagrange points do. They're more stable than the other points, and debris will tend to accumulate in those particular orbits.
just a natural process. It's just what happens. And we see it all the time in even lesser systems that, things will coalesce under gravitational attraction,
Mhm.
and molecular friction and things. Like, I don't know how reason can't answer that. And if reason, it's like he's aiming for a tie. Like, we can't possibly tell it's true, so therefore no one wins. Weird.
What is our purpose in it? Why are we here?
Well, that's two questions.
Yeah. Reason, I mean, we might be able to find out that with reason. Like, why are we here? Maybe aliens deposited. Maybe it's just a natural phenomenon. Maybe life just arises in places that are suitable for life.
Well, it's a
Maybe,
malformed question. He needs to be more
right.
specific. Like, why
Yes.
why am I here? Because my parents did the dirty and biology happened.
Yes.
Why are humans here? Well, natural selection, evolution, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Why is life here? Like, which why are we here are we answering? Because if we break it down into specific questions, we can answer almost all of them.
Oh, I love that, Jason. We can't know, therefore. Bucket sand! Smoke bomb! It's just smoke bomb runs. Oh, dear.
3. What happens after we die? 4.
We can answer that one too.
Yeah.
You're dead. Like,
Yeah.
a specific person, what specifically happens, that depends on your will if you leave one. And you should, because life is weird, things happen, and you never know when something's going to happen. So you definitely should have your shit in order for your loved ones so that they don't have to come up with these answers. But, generally speaking, we get put in a box and then we decay. Like, we know that. We've exhumed corpses for forensic reasons, and we see that happen.
So he's basically appealing to differences in opinion, to basically, some people say that is not what happens, and then appealing to unfalsifiability. Well, you can't falsify that. So, it's kind of this real, appealing to this idea that, well, you can't prove I'm wrong. Therefore, I win out of default. Or I draw out of default. Like I said, I think he's aiming for a draw right now. So I think he's angling for, well, we can't show those revelations aren't true. Therefore, they are, which is not how anything works, right? I can't say, if he was being logically and intellectually consistent, which doesn't appear to be, if he's basically going, well, reason doesn't care about reason. He's not being logically consistent, doesn't care about logic. But anyway, if he wants to be intellectually consistent, then if I say, well, I have a revelation that you will go to heaven if you give me $10,000, he should do it, because that's unfalsifiable as well. Or if you have a revelation that, if he buys a Honda, then his life is going to be perfect. He should do that as well, because if he wants to claim that unfalsifiable things, you should treat them as true, then he should be intellectually consistent about those claims. And
that's why it's logically impossible to have intellectual consistency from a zealot.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is our passionate concern with justice, with morality, with goodness, that is constantly betrayed in the actual life of the world, ever cosmically vindicated after the world or beyond the world? So I could go on, but I'm giving you 4 straightforward questions that no intelligent person, I think, can avoid having to raise, and yet to which there is no available or even conceivable answer. It's not as if there's no answer, but
I love that he's going on about how there's no answer, and we just answered them off the top of our heads.
Right.
But
it's not like there's no conceivable answer.
Yeah, he's kind of demonstrating the limits of his imagination. And in fact, the questions he chose also demonstrate the limits, the scope of his intellect, because
Mm.
they're all very me focused. Why am I here? What's my purpose? What happens to me after I die? Like,
Mhm.
so many of us, obviously, every human has different values and different priorities, and so your perspective is going to differ. But to me, none of those are even in the top 100 most important questions. I want to know about abiogenesis a whole hell of a lot more than I
Right.
want to know about what happens to me, you know?
Mm. Well, I think that sort of once you accept that you will end, it doesn't matter anymore. You know, it's just sort of this. Well, that's okay. It's fine. You know, I don't. It's very strange though. It's kind of so there's an idea within sort of science, particularly, and Popper did a lot of work on this, of fallibility. You can never get absolute truth for anything. Um, you know, sort of, so solipsism, the idea that everything around you may be a simulation or may be false or whatever. You can never get to an absolute knowledge of anything. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about whether something is true. We're sort of going, well, we have a high level of confidence that that is true. We're not saying we have this absolute knowledge. So is it true that the sky is blue? Sure. Could it be a simulated sky and the sky is actually green? Well, yeah, sure, but you know, at that
It's a
point, why
green
not just
screen.
right? Why not just curl into a ball and forget your life? Because nothing around you is true. Like seriously, you can't. Like he's doing that apologist thing of saying, well, if you're a skeptic, you've got to be absolutely disbelieving of everything, right? So I've heard it said before, well, how do you know anything if you're going to be a skeptic and doubt things? It's like, well, skepticism isn't sort of doubting everything. It's just doubting those things we don't have sufficient evidence for. That's
Mhm.
all.
That's what we
Like it
mean by
doesn't,
when we say question everything. Is like, take
right.
any assertion, anything that you've been raised to believe or whatever. And of course, we can't do it with everything, but as stuff comes up, then say, hey,
Mm,
do I actually have a good reason to believe this? If you
yes.
find a good reason, by all means, keep believing it until you're presented with information that makes you question it again. But
Mhm.
if you don't find a good reason to believe it, why do you believe it?
Yeah. And we're not asking for Dinesh for absolute certainty that the Bible is true. What we want is evidence and reasoning and arguments on why it is true or most likely true, why we should have a high level of confidence that it is true. And at the moment, he's sort of going, well, everything can be false.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem there. I mean, we
Okay.
don't have a really compelling reason to think so, but could
Yeah,
be,
Katrina
sure.
said it best. Skepticism doesn't necessarily lead to nihilism. Absolutely. 100% on. Bam. Just summed up what I said in like 5 minutes. It took me 5 minutes. I just said it in like 1 second. Okay, fantastic.
We'll get an answer tomorrow. Because let me put it this way. Let's take the question about life after death. And I'll close on this and open the door to further inquiry. Let's talk about life after death. Is there life after death, yes or no? Shakespeare says that death is the undiscovered country.
Why do we care what Shakespeare says? I'm sorry.
Right? He's on Shakespeare again. Why is he even on this topic? Because the Bible doesn't really have a consistent answer on what happens after death. So even if we had a way to verify what happens after death, that doesn't necessarily prove anything about the Bible, because some parts of it talk about Sheol, and some parts of
Yep.
it talk about a new heaven and a new earth, and some parts of it talk about in an eternal life in a very broad sense. Like,
Yeah.
which afterlife in the Bible are we talking about here?
Yeah. And it doesn't kind of go into heaven and hell kind of thing. It doesn't um it doesn't sort of say, oh, well, your spirit will go to heaven and be blessed and all this stuff. It really talks about eternal life, like you shall never perish kind of thing. It doesn't really get into the specifics very much, as you quite rightly pointed out. That sort of came later. And it does talk about, reigning with God and Jesus returning and creating the kingdom of God. But it is very much in the sense of a physical thing. It's not sort of this notion of, well, your spirit will rise to heaven and you will spend your days with God kind of thing. It's very strange. It's very strange that he's going down this route. Because he seems to be going, well, there's one claim of the Bible that's unfalsifiable. So what? Then we shouldn't consider it to be true.
Yeah, I mean, in that being a thing, an unfalsifiable thing, maybe he wants to argue we can't determine either way, but there are other claims that we can investigate, and many of them are false. And if you want to go back to, logic in the mathematical sense, or logic 101, if you put a whole bunch of statements, propositions in a line, and, you say, A plus B plus C plus D equals true or false. If anything in that line is false, then it's false. The whole thing as an overall, because it's not completely true. And there are things that we know are false. A tire is one great example. It's a thing that was declared through revelation that definitely did not happen the way it was said would happen. So yeah.
No traveler who has gone there has ever come back. I think we probably have to agree with this. You might get some tiny hints.
Except for one guy, according to Dinesh's tradition. Actually, no, Dinesh's tradition says several. Lazarus, that other person, and then, of course, the famous zombie apocalypse in Matthew, where, the saints rose from their grave. Like, as Hitchens said, resurrection was something of a banality at the time. So, yeah, a lot of people have come back, according to Dinesh's own beliefs. Weird how none of them, including Jesus, wrote down or even said to a scribe what it's like. Could it be because they didn't believe in that sort of thing at the time?
And I wonder if he thinks that near-death experiences are accurate recounts of the afterlife. Because a lot of Christians do. They think that near-death experiences are an accurate reflection of what is to awaits you after you die. So if he's saying no one's come back to tell us, then he's dismissing all of those accounts, like the rest of us do, as just a brain dying and producing, a bunch of images for you that account for something. We're not saying it didn't happen. It just, your brain is misfiring. It's dying. But, saying that, you're basically saying, hey, that's, I'm discounting all of those. Maybe he's going to say, except for one man. Is he going to say it?
Experiences, but by and large, we don't know. And not only do we not know, we have no way of knowing. The key point here is that probability, the absence of evidence is the evidence of absence. This is all gobbledygook.
To
He sounds
some
like
extent.
a flat earther. Kind of. I mean, that's like sort of
I've
saying,
never liked
hey,
the probability arguments, the Bayesian analysis. It's more probable that God exists than not. Like, what can you base that on in any real way?
So, parsimony is sort of the probabilistic thing. Like, is it more probable that this happened or probable that that happened? I think that it does have some merit. However, it doesn't tell you that much. Whether something actually happened or not. I think things like Occam's razor, for instance, like if you're looking for the answer, don't multiply entities. So if you hear hoofbeats, you would think horses and not zebras, because the probabilities that a zebra escaped from the zoo is a lot less probable than a horse escaped kind of thing. So whatever
that's
accounts
context dependent too. If you happen to be visiting a
sure.
nature preserve in South Africa, you might expect zebras.
I mean, like in our culture kind of thing. Like if we're just walking and we hear hoofbeats, it's a lot more likely that it's a police on a mounted, horse police than it is a zebra escaping from the zoo. Right. So this is kind of how parsimony works. But it doesn't. But it is possible that a zebra did escape from the zoo, and you're actually hearing a zebra. It's just not the most likely. So when we're looking at probability, we're really looking at instances of something occurring, but it doesn't actually tell you what any kind of ontological truth is. But he's occupying this part of, well, nobody's ever died and come back from the dead. Don't look at it like that's never happened with anybody, because the probability is that this is just a story, right? Occam's razor, looking at the Bible and the story of the resurrection of Jesus, is, well, it's a lot more probable, parsimonious, that this is just a story, that they just invented it. That's a lot more probable. But he's trying to say, no, don't pay attention to that.
Because all of this is only based on prior experience. If you show me a guy and tell me he has 3 eyes, I won't believe you. Because I've seen thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, and I've got a lot of experience, and based upon that, the probability that a guy can show up with 3 eyes may seem to me to be pretty low. But the question of life after death, if I think of an analogy for it, it's something more like the possibility of aliens. It's not even an exact analogy, but it's a similar analogy, because if I say to Alex, you believe in aliens, there's no probabilistic way to say, yes, we have nothing in our experience to go this way or that way.
Actually,
and here's my point.
We do have some basis for a probabilistic calculation. The Drake equation, that's what it's literally for. Now, there are some variables that aren't pinned down yet, but we do have ranges.
Yep.
We can calculate the likelihood of there being aliens, whether you mean life on another planet or advanced life, complex life, intelligent life, spacefaring capable life. There's different levels of certainty with these things, but we can actually come up with a calculation. It may or may not be accurate, but we can do a calculation and come up with a probability.
Bet you $5 he's never heard of the Drake equation.
American bucks or dollary dues?
Oh, look, American is too rich for my blood. I think that's about 500 Australian at this point. So, I think I would be poor if I did that.
It is exactly when reason not only breaks down, but reason can't even go there.
What are you talking about? Of course reason can go there. Apologists have been trying to make reason go there for the last 4,000 odd years. Like,
Ross,
talking about?
He's an old Earth creationist, and he's a huge advocate for aliens. Like, what is Dinesh even on? People on his team argue that there's freaking aliens.
But I mean, you apply it to his own question. You're like, well, reason can't even go there. It's like, why? You haven't provided a reason why we can't reason. If we've got, even if I'm a theist, right, and I've got this idea of the other, I can still reason on why it's true. I don't have to abandon reason and just go, well, faith kind of thing. I can actually, apologetics it essentially is reasoning why it is true.
This kind of reminds me of a football person that I knew in high school. We were taking a pre-calculus. It wasn't even full calculus. It was pre-calculus. And the teacher was trying to explain some concept or another. And this poor football dude, and not to, diss sports ball people, because there was another person on the football team who was also relatively big brain. He was the one who started the Jesus cult around me, and because we discussed the Amber novels during lunch breaks and so forth. Relatively big brain person. But this particular football person, he declared in the middle of the semester, he just stood up and said, "This is nonsense. I don't understand. Therefore, you're all making this up to make fun of me."
Wow.
He accused the teacher and the whole class of playing along just to make him feel stupid because he didn't get it, therefore no one can get it.
Kind of feel sorry for him, to be honest with you.
And Dinesh is kind of pulling the same thing.
Yeah.
That revelation steps in and delivers an answer.
Is the answer true?
Yeah, as we often say, when you just make up an answer, you stop looking for the real answer.
Is the answer true, Dinesh? That's like, seriously. What are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing.
He is kind of nailing down why there are these kinds of religious myths. If you're at a point in human history when a question simply cannot be answered, science hasn't advanced far enough. Our intellectual sciences haven't advanced far enough. They haven't heard from the Greek thinkers yet, so they don't even know what a fallacy is. So they want to answer a question. They cannot answer it due to various limitations, technological, psychological, whatever. So yeah, some people are just going to make up answers.
Sure.
Just to have an answer.
Yeah. We do it all the time. You hear a noise and you attribute it to the most plausible thing that you can think of. You hear you hear something and your mind will go through all of these things and just put an answer in there. It may not be accurate, but this instinctive, what it seems like is not a good way to answer things. But we do it all the time. Was that scream you heard? Was that somebody in trouble? Or was it someone having sex? Who knows? Like you sort of, but we'll fill in the blank depending on your sort of instinct.
Someone's having some very interesting sex.
Sure.
And here we are, debating.
Actually, the funniest one I ever heard was there was this girl really loud when I was younger, and sort of we were outside and she was very loud and she was like, "Your cock is talking to me," is what she screamed. And it prompted, what did it say? I really want to know what it said, seriously.
That answer true? And the question I want us to think about, at least to get started tonight, with what tools are you going to deliver a true or false verdict on subjects that are outside the domain of reason itself? I mean, Immanuel Kant says on the first page of the Critique of Pure Reason, before we discuss the great reach, whether we discuss whether this is reasonable or that's not reasonable and whether this is empirical, he goes, we first got to set the boundaries of reason. What is it that reason can and cannot know? Why? Because what Kant is basically getting at is that once you go beyond the reach of reason, faith is not unreasonable at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay attention to Kant, really.
He can't do it.
Kant had some very strange ideas about that. And I think that, but the thing is, Kant, he wasn't critiquing any reason. He was doing the critique of pure reason, right? The pure reason, so this whole idea of fallibility, that you cannot get to pure knowledge, kind of thing. But I disagree with Kant that faith can get you there. Faith doesn't make up for reason. Faith is just a belief in something without any kind of justification for doing so. At least faith in what D'Souza is talking. Because people use faith differently. Some people just say faith is confidence. Well, that still uses reason. He's basically saying, hey, some things you have to be unreasonable and irrational. I don't know what he's talking about, but he still isn't making an argument about why it's true.
Right?
Right. He's basically just saying, hey, you can't know that it's true, have faith in it. That is not an argument for whether it's true. It's an argument of, maybe it's an argument of why you should believe it's true, but it's not actually an argument of that the actual thing is true. So I'm very confused at what he's going for here.
Why? Because you have nothing else. So what I want to emphasize here, and I'm happy to discuss all the specifics we've covered today, or Alex has covered today, but essentially the Bible is something that is taught in church. It's a tool for ministry, for exhortation, to get people to live better lives, to help them deal with their life in the world. I have never heard a single pastor, for example, and I'm quite sure this doesn't happen in Jewish synagogues as well, going, you know what, let's go out and find the Amalekites of our day and kill them right now.
No, it's just gays and trans people.
I mean, yeah, there's that, in the English-speaking world, but yeah, there are preachers who do that today, and for various groups. I mean, we've all
Witches
seen
in Nigeria,
or the Muslims and Christians killing each other in Nigeria,
right?
The modern day Amalekites, whatever. But that's not. There's almost every word he just said was wrong in some way. Like this idea that the Bible is designed to help you live a better life. How? In what way? Because we know historically what the Bible is for, what its purpose is. It's a tool for political power. It's another lever of control over people.
And it might be that
does it make their lives better?
Well, it might be the community of the church makes their lives better because they have a community and they have, a place where they'll support one another. But that's not the Bible. That's people helping people.
Right. People are going to do that regardless. The church provides a convenient vector for it. And in fact, some ways, I'd argue it's actually interfered with the sense of community, because when a church seizes social power over a small town, like this is the place everyone congregates and demands on their time and so on and so forth, it makes the focus about the mythology and not the community. Like if you never had a church and instead you had a town hall meeting and everyone would congregate for a few hours beforehand to mix and mingle and then focus on the issues that affect their actual lives, I think you'd end up with a better community, but that's just me.
Well, you certainly wouldn't have one that ostracizes people because they've done something that sort of in the book says is wrong, kind of thing, or has some interpretation of the wrong. And so they ostracize people.
You must purge the evil from among you.
Yes, that kind of stuff. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Nobody says that. No one even thinks that. No one reads the passage that way. Nobody.
What? Yeah, and that's a really good point, Pandora's Unboxing. An Israeli politician called Palestinians modern Amalekites. Yeah.
And it's not like this is an old debate that doesn't age well. This just happened. So Dinesh knows very well what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah. It was, a week ago?
I'm not sure exactly when it was recorded, but it's very recent, yes.
And sort of did this whole idea. I mean, he's obviously not seen Matt Powell call for the deaths of people who he believes are sinners and fornicators and all of that kind of stuff. Like, these people are out there, Dinesh. They are out there. You're just ignorant of them. So yeah, like, forget treating the Bible as true. Dinesh hasn't even said things that are true. Wow.
Reads the passage of the fall in the way that Alex described it. And so we have a little bit of a problem. We got a book. It's a book that exists within a community for a purpose that the community is extremely clear about. This book is used every single Sunday millions of times and all around the world. It's used in Protestant and Catholic churches. Obviously, there are interpretive communities that differ on how things can be read and understood. There's also the whole separate question of the relationship of the Old Testament to the New. There's an old saying that goes that the New Testament is in the Old concealed. The Old Testament is in the New revealed. So the Old Testament and the New exist in a kind of odd relationship to each other. In fact, so odd that one party, the Jews, repudiates the relationship altogether. And from the Christian point of view, the Old Testament is
So is it true? Is it true? Dinesh, what are you talking about?
Accidentally touches on a really good point. Like, we
Yeah.
often mention how the fact that there are so many different factions of Christianity shows that it's very, very open to interpretation and is clearly
Sure.
not divine guidance. But Dinesh takes it a step further and says the people who believed in this God
Yes.
deny what the people who follow the one radical preacher who got crucified,
Mhm.
what they say. Like, where this religion came from, they're saying, no, all of that is bullshit. And that's an even bigger division, because if either one of them were definitely demonstrably true, the other would be on their side.
And if sort of zombie saints rose from graves and walked around the city, there would be not one person that would believe that he wasn't the Son of God. You know, this would be absolutely understood to be the case in that region, and it wasn't. Tons of people didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah after his death, including in the town where he died. But the Bible has all of these miracles and things happening. How is that even possible?
Stuff that historians of the time recorded notably did not happen.
Mhm.
And there were historians, you know, people like to say,
Yes.
oh, well, the literacy rate, people couldn't write what. Jerusalem was the capital of a Roman province.
Yes.
You telling me no one in that city could write? Come on now. We know from the scriptures, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, from other texts at the time, Jesus himself was literate. Where's the gospel of Jesus? Why didn't he write anything down? Or did the early church hide that too because it was catastrophic to the myth they were building? Who knows?
New conspiracy theory. The gospel of Jesus is in the Vatican, you know, locked away. And it basically says, you know, I'm going to fool the entire world. That's just new conspiracy. Just putting it out there, you know, just fuel for your mind.
Is incorporated but superseded by the new, and there are different ways of looking at that relationship, which we can get into. Let me just close by saying this.
Rather long 3 minutes there.
Oh, it's a rather long 3 minutes.
It's maybe you meant you finish soon in the way that Jesus promised.
No. Let me pause.
Nice dig.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you finished sooner in the way that Jesus promised to be coming back sooner. Yeah. Yeah, he said he'd come back before some of the people there had met their death. So I think he's just a tiny bit overdue. What do you think, Ember? Just a smidge overdue.
He went out to get cigarettes. Haven't seen him since.
I love I think it was the Bill Hicks thing. Maybe he hasn't come back because people are still wearing crosses. You know, like it's a bit on the nose if you died by crucifixion and it would like, what did he say? It would be like going up to Jackie Onassis with a rifle pendant kind of thing and just go,
Dark Matter did a cartoon on that. Carlin did a thing too. He was like, oh, you know, if I were Jesus, I wouldn't come back either. Like, these people killed me and now they're worshiping the thing they killed me with.
Right.
Fuck that.
Right. Yep. Horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Pause right here because
and ambiguous soon. But I'd love to question you on some of the things you've already said.
All right,
if you don't mind.
We will put the ball in your court. So I think what's going to happen now is we're going to go into discussion.
Hope so.
Right? Okay, and you're going to ask me.
Bloviate more, dude. You are so stalling. Holy crap! Wow. Was this going to be prepare at all? Like, I don't think he prepared in the slightest. I don't think he took Alex O'Connor seriously. It seems like he hasn't prepared in the slightest.
Maybe it'll be revealed by revelation.
Maybe you just have to have faith that his arguments are convincing. You know, don't use reason.
That's another good point.
Don't use reason.
So many preachers, they say, I don't prepare my sermons because I need As the gospel says, let the Holy Spirit flow through you and speak the words of the Holy Spirit. That's why we end up with people like Julie Green and Kat Kerr who just spout random nonsense because they're completely relying on the Holy Spirit to do their preaching for them.
Well, the Holy Spirit dropped the ball. I tell you what, if it wasn't Dinesh, then somebody dropped the ball. If it was the Holy Spirit, then the Holy Spirit dropped the ball. Fine.
He does that a
We'll
lot.
discuss, and I'll ask you some.
Sure, and I'm happy to essentially take the things that I said in my opening statement and slot them in and apply them to the things that you just said right there. So you began by saying that the Bible is a strange book to ask these questions of because of its purpose. I assume you'd agree with me that the Bible is a collection of books rather than a singular text with different authors, different intentions, and most importantly, different genres. So the first question I suppose I'd like to ask you is, do you agree, for example, that at least some biblical texts are attempts at historical biography, such as in the Gospels?
Of course, I would agree with that. But let me just qualify it this way.
Sure.
When we think of the Bible as revealed, the question now becomes, what do we mean? Did God write the book? Did God inspire the book and human beings wrote it? Did God show human beings events that they then described in their own words? Okay, so the reason these things are important is it seems to me, to answer the question I raised earlier about in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, the way I understand it is there's a perfect revelation shown to a gospel, to a Bible, to a Jewish scribe who sees it, so to speak, but writes it in his own words. When I look at the book of Revelation, same thing.
And does it get anything wrong? Do the scribes get anything wrong?
It's quite possible that they, when you say get anything wrong, they are writing it in human terms. I mean,
I mean the specifically mundane human things. I'm not talking about when the author of Genesis says that God created the heavens and the earth, or talks about spirit moving across the face of the water. This is clearly mythological. This is clearly an attempt at mythological writing. That's fine. It would be silly to ask if that's true or not. But when somebody...
I don't think it is mythological writing at all. I think that it is simply... I mean, put it this way. If we were in the year 4000 BC, if we were John the Divine, and let's just say that God showed us in a vision,
Okay, this is what I'm talking about. O'Connor is talking to him, right? He is having a conversation with him. Dinesh is having a preach to the audience, right? He is clearly more worried about the audience than he is about his opponent. This is such a fundamental mistake. Like, I get that there are times where you say to the audience, look, this is the case that I think, and not to your opponent, because it is them that you're ultimately trying to impress. But never ignore the person. Like, he's just ignoring him like he doesn't matter. He's not taking control of the conversation. He's avoiding it by talking to the audience. I don't understand how this man got important enough to have a conversation with Alex O'Connor. I don't understand. I just don't, I'm confused. I'm confused and scared.
End of the world, right? Apocalypse. We would then write down the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, death and famine and destruction. We're not engaging in myth making at all. I'm actually writing what I see.
So you think there'll be a 7-headed demon?
Of course not. I'm saying that to me, what I'm seeing is so. Let's just say, for example, it is a thermonuclear explosion of a kind that the ancient Bible writer doesn't even know what it is, right? And the consequence of it is death and destruction and famine. He's going to write it down the way he sees it.
But
right?
Where's he going to get the 7-headed dragon and the prostitute from?
This is his
like a human attempt to describe a nuclear reaction?
Yes, because when words.
So we know that Revelation wasn't really revelation. It was propaganda written by the Christians being persecuted by Nero. Like there's several very thinly veiled poetic references to Nero and Rome and the way it's not prophecy in the way the Old Testament is full of prophecy. It's a poetic description of the roughly 70 CE period.
Yeah, so the dragon, I think that the dragon could represent a powerful state, or one of them represented Rome or something like that. Like it's allegorical. It's metaphorical of the events that were transpiring at the time. It's not actually an actual 7-headed dragon like a hydra is going to come out of nowhere and eat the smaller dragon, and that this isn't. But Dinesh has put himself in a corner because he said, no, I think that's actually going to happen. That's actually a nuclear thing. Really?
Yeah, I mean, he's speculating, but also this highlights kind of the fundamental difference between skeptical atheists, because not all atheists are skeptical, of course, but the ones of us who are skeptical, and believers of smooth brain like Dinesh, because Alex wants to know, why should anyone believe this? Is any of this true? Like, the Bible makes truth claims. Let's look at those. And Dinesh is like, well, you don't understand about revelation, because it's really about the vision, you see. They're not even talking about the same thing.
I think it's important at this point to pin down, and Alex touched on it at the start, what kind of truth is he talking about? Like, he went through allegorical truth and metaphorical truth and historical truth and sort of truth as we understand it in reality. What kind of truth are we talking about?
And images fail. Metaphor is the actual conduit to truth.
Now, I'd understand if that were the case, if you said that perhaps after a nuclear blast, somebody describes it as the gods of fire descending upon man with their flaming swords or something like that. But like a prostitute and a seven-headed dragon?
Well, first of all, I'm not saying it is a nuclear explosion. The problem is we're given this admittedly phantasmagorical future account, right? Sure. It is so wrenching and powerful that many people, for example, have tried to render it by art. And it's not easy to do it, right? It's not easy to do it because we have to stop and realize, first of all, that we're dealing.
Nobody's drawn a thermonuclear explosion for it, though. Just saying.
I'm thinking of a sermon from Bishop Alan Didio when he was trying to link the movie Oppenheimer to the Book of Revelation. He wasn't going with the dragon, but he was going with a passage about men who fire arrows that never miss and saying, see, these are missiles. It was pretty wild.
Missiles miss. They're called missiles. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Should have seen the Scud missiles in the Iraq War. They missed all the time, like consistently.
Not only with the limitations of perception, but the limitations of language. Let me give you a simple example. I come to America from India. I have never eaten a mushroom. Okay? I ask you, Alex, what does a mushroom taste like?
Sure.
I would submit that you would be completely unable to render to me in words, however lengthy and ornate, what a mushroom actually tastes like.
That may be true, but I was asking, for example, about Jesus' presentation at the Temple of Jerusalem after his birth. This is not like trying to describe a mushroom or the end of the world.
No. Okay, so now let's talk about that.
Hold on a second. This is a historical...
Good catch, Alex. Good catch. Don't let him... So, in a debate, it's important not to sort of be too sort of bloviate and go too long kind of thing. But if you have something to say, definitely get it out. Don't let Dinesh, just squelch you. There's no way. There's no way. Good work, Alex.
Event that's being recorded by one New Testament writer at the same time as another New Testament writer says that the family had traveled to Egypt. I don't think this is an attempt at metaphor or allegory, as I would say of Genesis. Whether you think that is or not, I would say that in the case of the Gospels, we can agree that in at least some instances, this is a clear attempt at mundane history. This is not an attempt at writing some kind of metaphor to explain a truth that's otherwise unknowable to the human mind. It's a very straightforward attempt to record what actually happened, and they contradict each other.
Okay, so, and here's the thing. Even though Dinesh is more focused on the audience, even if you understand, oh, well, Dinesh knows what I'm talking about, the important thing, and Alex will be aware of this, is that the audience may not. So he's putting out in really clear terms, not for Dinesh, he's doing it for the audience, right? He's making his case for the audience in very clear terms. Very well done. Incredibly well done.
They contradict each other because they're written by 4 different people.
Sure.
So let me ask you this. If God were writing it, I'm quite sure he would have written it once.
That is not answering anything, right?
He's figuring out how to dodge a little.
Oh, yeah.
You would need 4.
Sure.
Okay?
So some of them are wrong then?
No. Okay, so when you say they're wrong, let's consider Luke's gospel for a minute. Yep. Luke is a medical doctor. Luke is not present at the events being described. Luke is virtually in the position of Thucydides writing the Peloponnesian War. Now, Thucydides did fight in the war, but in most of the events described by Thucydides in the Peloponnesian War, he wasn't there.
Well, we don't even know that Luke was written by Luke. We don't know that.
Pretty sure it wasn't.
Yeah.
Very unreliable, right?
No, on the contrary, it is in fact the most reliable account of the Peloponnesian War that historians have.
Let's not say that it is reliable, though.
No, it is. What I'm trying to say is that when you're talking about historicity, and you're talking about historicity now in the ancient world, you have to recognize that these people are not approaching it as modern historians. Luke is going around interviewing people.
So let me ask this very, very straightforwardly then.
Okay.
Luke says that after the birth of Jesus, the family fled to Egypt. Matthew says that they went to the Jerusalem temple. Are they both correct, or is one of them wrong?
Who the heck cares? I mean, look.
Well, I do. And so
who the heck cares? That's the debate. Is it true? Which one is true? And if both cannot be true, this is the logical contradiction. Both of those statements cannot be true.
Exactly.
They can't be.
It doesn't matter which one is true.
Correct.
If one of them is wrong, then the story is wrong.
Right. And that story is not true, even if the other one is true. And then you can get onto how accurate does it be for the Bible to be considered true? Because that's important, right? Like if somebody tells a story of a car crash, that is true, even though some of the details might be wrong.
Ooh, Booba Sweat, by divine inspiration, has given us an answer to this conundrum. Schrodinger's Jesus. Remember, Jesus is the Father and therefore is also omnipresent. He was in both places.
But I don't think did Jesus as a human have those superpowers? I don't think Jesus was
mostly not.
And omnipresent.
His miracles were pretty limited. Loaves and fish, basically one-upping pre-existing miracle stories for the most part. Like, oh, you resurrected one guy, well, I resurrected 500, and shit like that. And some of his miracles were superseded by his own saints, like Saint Nicholas of Myra. You know, Jesus fed 5,000. Saint Nicholas fed an entire city for a whole winter. You know, it's crazy shit. But also, rather famously, Jesus's miracle mojo did not function when he was around his family who did not believe his bullshit. He couldn't do his magic tricks because they didn't believe. So his powers were very sharply limited.
You do, but let me say why what you care about is not only trivial, but indicates a kind of unwillingness to try to get what the text is trying to communicate.
I'll tell you why I don't think it's trivial. Because I think that the reason why Luke may have invented the flight to Egypt, he tells us. Luke says, when he records the flight to Egypt, and then they return from Egypt, he says, this is so that we can fulfill the prophecy from Hosea chapter 11, out of Egypt I shall call my son. Now, in Hosea, God is talking here about the nation of Israel. At least in this case, unlike the Matthew prophecy, the prophecy actually exists and we can interrogate it. It seems to me like what Luke is doing here is attempting to display Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy. And in fact, he tells us that that's what he's doing. Therefore, if it is the case that Jesus didn't go to Egypt and didn't come out of Egypt on his return, then this would undermine Luke's attempts to identify Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy. That's why I think it is relevant.
Well, look.
And not trivial.
Right, but I think that
Would you agree with that? I mean, do you think it's a completely trivial point? If it's
ask him questions. He doesn't want to answer. Like, he's not even looking at Alex. He's basically sitting there looking at the audience, pretending he doesn't exist. Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Also, this is a masterclass for holding someone's feet to the fire. Every time a person tries to dismiss your point, you just you bring them back around. You say, no, let me tell you why it's not trivial. And then when they try to dodge again, say, no, do you agree that it's not trivial? Like, answer the damn point.
Right. And I got to say, like, Dinesh has now gotten to the point where he's arguing that the reality of events happening as described in the Bible is not pertinent to the topic, is the Bible true? Like, how do you get to that? Like, it doesn't matter, really? So that the entire, why did you debate this topic? It doesn't matter if the events are true or not. It doesn't matter. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The point,
Why
as
is it
you,
included in the
the
first
point,
place?
as you stated it before, is trivial. The point you're now raising is not trivial, but the point you're now raising is one in which you have 3 centuries of Jewish-Christian disputation about whether Jesus is the Messiah, okay? And by and large, the disputation breaks down in this way. The Jews are the biblical literalists, and the Christians are the sort of metaphorical readers. And I say this because let's take a very famous passage that bears on this very topic, where Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple. And the Jews go, you said the temple would be destroyed. Now, interestingly, Jesus did say the temple would be destroyed, and the temple was in fact destroyed in 70 AD. In fact, 40 years after Jesus said that, the temple was in fact physically razed to the ground, and the Jews dispersed in a huge diaspora. But my point is, Jesus doesn't reply that. Jesus doesn't say, hey, listen, wait 40 years. Jesus says, no, you're misreading me completely. When I said the temple, I was actually speaking of the temple of my body.
But he doesn't tell them that.
But this is
But
stated.
we're told that that's what he means.
We're told
He
that's what he
doesn't say
means.
that.
So
Yeah, he doesn't tell them
We're
that.
told that's what he means. Well, then it
Yeah.
wasn't Jesus who said it, was it? That's
Correct.
excusegetics. That's reinterpretation of what he actually said to try to pretend that it means something else.
Mm-hmm. So he failed the prophecy, and the authors say, hey, he meant the temple of his body. And because that's really lame, they say, well, it was destroyed later. Well, which is it?
Yeah, and why would he phrase it that way? That doesn't make sense in the context of the time. To the Jewish spiritualists of that age, there only was the body.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is, here you have a case where you have an event, you have a Jewish literalist reading and a Christian metaphorical reading.
Yeah.
Another example, and
So would you say then the flight to Egypt is a metaphor? Is that what you're trying to say? In other words, I'm trying to understand what it is that you're doing here to actually answer the question that I'm asking you, which is about, because here's my theory, here's an idea.
Okay.
Luke, the author of Luke, invents the flight to Egypt in order to identify Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, meaning that when we read Luke, we should note that where it appears that he's making historical claims, we should note his willingness to twist history in order to fulfill a theological
Well, you don't know if
claim.
he's doing that. You're assuming that.
Good point. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. If he's twisting and making up facts, like he's inventing these facts to fit Jesus to the Jewish prophecy of the Messiah, then we should look at everything that Luke says in doubt that he is making stuff up too. And I would even go one step further. If Luke's doing that, I would submit that the other disciples could have done that as well. And it is not a far stretch to imagine a disciple inventing facts to account for, to make Jesus fit prophecy.
Mm-hmm. In fact, we've caught them doing that in a couple other places. Like there's, how did Jesus enter Jerusalem for the first time? In one story, he rode a donkey. In another story, he rode 2 donkeys somehow. In yet another story, if I may be mistaken on this one because it's fuzzier in my head, but he walked because he was humble. Each of those is required to fulfill a different prophecy, so of course he did all of them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we get back to Schrodinger's Jesus again, like he obviously did all of them at once, even though they're mutually exclusive.
This is your theory.
No. What I'm saying is that that's one thesis to explain the contradiction between Luke and Matthew. If you want to say that it's trivial, then fine, but we still have to explain how it comes about. And what I'm saying is one idea of how this comes about leads to us undermining our trustworthiness of Luke. What I'm asking you for is your explanation that would not lead to us having to undermine the trustworthiness of Luke.
I don't have the ability to referee that passage. I'm not aware of this contradiction. I'll have to go back and look and see.
That's fine.
Go and look it up. But what I am doing is I'm questioning your methodology and your kind of what would I call it? You got the Jews and the Christians arguing about events, and they're very complex events, and they're very powerfully meaningful events.
How dare you bring up contradictions? How dare you? What the hell?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Like he's painting this picture. Like rabbinical scholars are arguing with Jesuits to this day about the specific details of Jesus's life, and that's just not the case. Like, yes, Jesus is mentioned in the Torah, But the Jesus in the Torah lived 100 years before the Jesus the Christians think is the Jesus. And it's wild because the Jesus in the Torah was a blasphemer, was a sorcerer, and died because he was a horrible person. And scholars might argue, did the Christians just read that passage about that Jesus, import it into their present day, and start spreading bullshit about a made-up version of this Jesus? Because there's so many similarities, it's unreal. But, you know, the Jewish scholars would just say, well, there was this Jesus, but the Jesus you're talking about, we don't have any record for, so we don't care.
But his methodology is flawed, sure.
Mhm.
Sure, Dinesh, sure.
Let's take, for example, Abraham and Isaac are going up the mountain. And Isaac says to Abraham something to the effect of, where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham says to him, God will provide. God will provide. Now, in a Jewish reading, this whole thing has got to be understood in terms of, here's Abraham, he's willing to sacrifice his son. God says, stop. It's a tale of obedience. In the Christian reading, it's not that. Or it's not only that. The Christian reading is, Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. So when Isaac says, where's the lamb? And Abraham says, God will provide, it is a foreshadowing of a significant event in the New Testament. Now, again,
There's no biblical scholar believes that that's a prediction of Jesus. Like,
It's clearly a foreshadowing of the band Lamb of God would come about in the early 21st century.
Right. So, yeah, so they say this is sort of foreshadowing. I don't know how it is, because you've got basically Isaac is put aside and a lamb appears, and the lamb's supposed to be Jesus, kind of thing. But basically they point to Isaac being the son that is foreshadowed, right? But the problem is that it's the lamb that's killed, which is then Jesus. So is Jesus the son, or is Jesus the lamb in this allegory? Because it can be interpreted many different ways. And this is sort of just fitting accounts to an old story. It is about obedience. It is about obeying God. Because Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son. It's about obedience. That's what it's about.
It also strongly hints. Now, you know, many have made the case over the years that story also has been changed over time, that originally Abraham did sacrifice his son.
Right.
And then people said, well, where did the nations of Israel come from if our progenitor was sacrificed? This doesn't make sense. And then for a little while, we had resurrection stories about that. And then we had, Abraham had a different son and named him Isaac in honor of the previous Isaac or whatever.
Yeah.
And the story got changed to do away with those potential contradictions. But also because at the time, child sacrifice was just a thing you did. I mean, Deuteronomy is full of it. Like, you will give your firstborn son to the Lord. It's the same language they use when they talk about sacrificing goats and sheep and whatnot. And there's apologetics around that too. Oh, well, when it says that, using the same words we're talking about for ritual sacrifice of animals, what it means is you'll turn them over to the priesthood. But that doesn't track either, because one of the tribes was the dedicated priesthood. You had to be born into them to be a priest.
Tribe of Levi.
Yeah. And they had, point is, they had child sacrifice. They definitely did child sacrifice, and they were cool with it. So Abraham doing this, not out of character for the beliefs at the time.
Right.
As I say, the Jews and the Christians argued this for 3 centuries and more. I'm not even trying to adjudicate who's right, but I'm saying you're waltzing in, coming with neither of these two assumptions. In fact, I assume you think that the Old Testament is as mythological as the New.
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to,
and I guess what I'm saying is that people who read the Bible to understand what the Bible is trying to say and what we can learn from it, do what the Jewish rabbis did and do what theologians like Augustine and Anselm and so many others have done, they don't really do what you're doing, which is saying, hey, Luke must have talked to a guy who thought it happened over here, but in fact, this guy says the roof was thatched, but another guy says they let the guy in through the roof who had to be healed. Contradiction.
Yeah.
No, they definitely
Wow.
do that. That was a big part of theological writing in the 4th and 5th century, was coming up with apologetic excuses to harmonize these stories that clearly contradict.
And we
They
have
made their careers on this shit.
And plus, he's not talking about something that's open for interpret. He is talking about 2 series of events that were written as true that are mutually exclusive. They both cannot be true. That's what he's talking about. So you can't say, well, it's all open to interpretation. One of those things actually happened and one did not, or neither happened. But they both can't have happened because they are mutually exclusive. It's impossible. Not unless you want to throw away, and I think that's what he was alluding to, entire reason itself. And then why even talk? Like,
Well,
why think about anything?
He is a Trinitarian, so by definition, he's already thrown away reason. Law of identity gone. So of course, why wouldn't the law of non-contradiction go with it? It just it's wild, but the depth of it is so much more than that, because most atheists will look at this thing and say, we don't have any reason to believe it. You haven't given us a good reason to buy into it. But we're on a different level here. We're saying not only is there no reason to believe it, there's a reason to disbelieve it, because the shit that it says is true, it itself shows cannot be true. We don't know which thing or both isn't true, but everything in here cannot all be true.
Right. Absolutely. And it not only can't be true by our current scientific understanding of the world, but as Alex has pointed out, it can't be true in an internal critique, right? So he's only doing an internal critique. He's not saying, hey, we have evidence that Luke never, that Jesus never went to Egypt and then came. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that if you just take an internal critique, like treat the passage as true, it is contradictory. It is mutually exclusive, those 2 things that it says. So it's not just problems in our current understanding, it's problems in the text logically, which Dinesh wants to cover up as contradictions. No. What the hell?
I'm like, is this your way of trying to say the Bible is not true?
Yes, it is. The Old Testament. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it is.
The Old Testament.
I love that.
The audio's gone and turned to shit.
Oh. Okay. Give me a sec. StreamYard, I don't know why you're like this, but it's really annoying. Yes, I'm talking to my my program.
Yeah, that's fair. I talk to my computer all the time. I also talk to myself. I'll forget my teacup when I go to make tea, and then I'll be like, "Damn it, Ember!"
Oh, I should have looked at the time code. Silly.
5118.
Oh, thank you so much, Ems. What would I do without you? 51.
Have a much shorter show.
Maybe I don't want a shorter show. Maybe I want a longer show. You ever think about that?
We're going for the Gutsick Gibbon crowd up in here.
Oh, yeah. Good crowd. Very, very gentle apes. And modern apes, I'm sorry. Gentle and modern apes.
Yes, both of those things.
Yeah. I'm an ape and proud. Come on, let's embrace our apehood.
They let the guy in through the roof who had to be healed. Contradiction. And I'm like, is this your way of trying to say the Bible is not true?
Yes, it is. The Old Testament. Yes.
Okay.
It's precisely what I'm doing. The Old Testament is not fully mythological. I think Genesis is mythological. I think that Exodus makes more of an attempt at history but has mythological undertones. I think that the military conquests I mentioned in my opening statements are attempts at describing literal historical events. I think
I
that
agree.
Psalms are poetry. I think that Job is mythology. I don't think a man called
I
Job
agree.
actually existed, right? And so there are lots of different genres here. The reason I'm asking about the contradictions in the gospel, and I understand if you don't want to talk about the specific example of Egypt and Jerusalem, fine, whatever. Maybe you can send me an email about it later or something, that's fine. But the reason I bring it up is to say that there are lots of these. And in each case, if we try to look at why they might be contradicting each other, the reasons I think we're given.
Oh, is the sound still robotic?
It's slightly better. I can actually understand the words, but it's kind of garble adjacent.
Oh, hang on a sec. I'm gonna close down all my windows and just restart Chrome entirely. I'm so sorry, everybody. I did have sort of problems earlier. I thought I got it, but give me 1 sec and I will be back. I will.
Yeah, scratchy. That's it. Once again, y'all are summing up what takes me 20 words to say with just one. Brevity is the soul of wit, and I don't have enough coffee to be witty. Such is life. But hey, while Mark's away, it's piracy time. We're taking over the stream. So if you're new here, take a minute to hit that subscribe button. Mark just crossed the 2K mark. The double mark. Whatever. Anyway, subscribe for more content like this. Also, Mark's got debates coming up, all kinds of goodies. Join memberships if you want to help support the channel. Mark has a whole bunch of cool custom emojis, some of which you've already seen flash by in the chat. I'm hitting some random ones now. And join the community. If you're watching in the future, ring the bell for notifications. We'd love to see you in a live chat, adding your thoughts and helping us condense our thoughts into much more bite-sized packages in a succinct way. It definitely makes the show more fun, because having you guys live is the reason we do this live instead of just pre-recording it and editing it down to manageable bits. This is much more fun, and I greatly enjoy it. And I believe that the people who join us in these live chats every week on both Mark's channel and mine, because we alternate every week, I think they enjoy it too, because that's why they're here. At least one could hope. I don't know if Mark has a Patreon, but I'm running out of stuff to stall with. If you do know anyone who enjoys this sort of content, do feel free to share. In fact, I encourage you to, because there's a lot of people within our own community who don't know about a lot of other channels. I'm still discovering new channels every week, and I've been here for a year and a half now. And still, I'll find new channels, and I'll go into the live chat, and there's a bunch of people I know, and I'm like, why didn't these people tell me about this wonderful channel? So if you're enjoying the content, share it. Tell a friend. Bring a buddy next time. Hell yeah.
Thank you so much. I do apologize. I really do. This is it's absolutely share audio. Yep. Okay. Do tell me if it's still being bad. I think next thing is I restart my system or something, because this is a little frustrating. Won't lie. A little frustrating.
Yeah. I
really
know the
apologize
feeling.
there.
Mine does a different bag of tricks. As you know,
Really? Yeah.
occasionally it freezes up and I have to completely restart the video.
Yeah.
The Synoptic Gospels specifically play. I think Genesis is mythological. I think
Yeah,
that
there we
Exodus
go.
makes more of an attempt at history that has mythological undertones. I think that the military conquests I mentioned in my opening statements are attempts at describing literal historical events. I think that
agree.
Psalms are poetry. I think that Job is mythology. I don't think a man called
I
Job
agree.
actually existed, right? And so there are lots of different genres here. The reason I'm asking about the contradictions in the gospel, and I understand if you don't want to talk about the specific example of Egypt and Jerusalem, fine, whatever. Maybe you can send me an email about it later or something, that's fine. But the reason I bring it up is to say that there are lots of these. And in each case, if we try to look at why they might be contradicting each other, the reasons I think we're given tell us that the historicity of this text should be in dispute. For example, I mentioned the date of Jesus' death. The Synoptic Gospels specifically place this after the Passover meal. They have the Last Supper as the Passover meal.
Okay.
John uniquely sets it before the Passover because he has the theological purpose of wanting to depict Jesus as the Passover lamb.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a contradiction if the Gospels are supposed to be historical accounts of what happened to Jesus, which I imagine if we were having a debate about whether Christianity were true, about whether the God of the Bible existed, you might put forward, say, an argument for the resurrection of Jesus. You might say, well, we have good historical evidence to think that Jesus rose from the dead, and you might point to the story of the crucifixion and the disciples seeing him after he died. This is a common thread. The problem is that if we're treating it as historical in an area like that, then we have to engage with it as a historical text. Why would they contradict each other? I would say for the same reason that Luke contradicts Matthew in the birth narratives, because they're attempting to make a theological point, which tells us at least, and maybe you think that the New Testament is an entirely theological and in no way a historical text. Would you agree at least that the New Testament writers are seemingly willing to adapt the historicity of an event in order to serve a theological point? Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I would agree.
Yes, but also no.
Schrodinger's answer there, both yes and no. I get what he's saying.
Mm-hmm. If you can't dodge it, just why not both it?
Well,
my goodness,
you can say yes, but clarify, and I presume that's what he's going to say. But the fact that yes is in there at all is really problematic. Like the fact that he's saying yes and no. What is the case for no? Like, how do you know where they haven't changed something or they have changed something? This was the point that Bart Ehrman has made many, many times, that if we know they changed some things, there may be others that they changed and we don't know it, right? That there are no contradictory accounts, but it's still not true. I think that even this answer is undermined completely the Bible.
And it's so wild because we know they copied off of each other. How do you fuck up a detail like that when you're looking at the other manuscripts and copying them? Unless you change it intentionally. And we know that kind of shit happened. We've seen,
we know that
scholars have done the graphs like, oh, well, your Jesus did these miracles. I'm going to retell the story with even more miracles to make him look even more divine. And so on it went. They were always trying to cram in a few more prophecies, a few more miracles to make it even more true, even to the degree of altering details from previous stories. Because we look at the Bible today and we see these 4 gospels lined up all together, whatever. At the time, they weren't assembled. There were competing versions of Christianity. One of the reasons there was the canonical councils was to reconcile all this stuff, because there were the Matthewists and the Lukeists and the Paulists and so forth. And they said, why don't we all come together? We'll just put all our books into one and call it all Holy Gospel. And then we'll take these ones we don't like, the Gospel of Truth and the Gospel of Thomas, and we'll just we'll wipe out those people like they're Malachites, Yes. And it'll be settled.
And you can thank Constantine for that one again. He's the one who brought forth that ecumenical council, which decided what books went into the Bible and what books did not get into the Bible. What would be the standard text? And then, as you say, everybody else, they unalived.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very different perspective.
Definitely is a contradiction.
Well, it's not a contradiction because, Thucydides is relaying historical events to make a moral point about the nature of politics, and both are completely consistent with each other. Sure. It's not as if Thucydides is, so he's a student of power politics. He is making a point. His speeches are driven at making a point, but the point is excavated out of the actual events. Now, I think that there's a reason that we're given 4 perspectival accounts of Jesus's life, and they're not identical. In fact, as I say, if they were identical, you wouldn't need 4. The point of reading these, and I think the way to read them. Let me say a word. If you want to.
Yeah, he's right. There are many more than 4. There was an infancy of account of Jesus. There was the Gospel of Thomas. There was a ton of non-canonical Gospels.
Determine veracity. You have to operate a little bit like a jury, and by that I mean. Pick up the Gospel of Mark, the first of the Gospels. Now, by the way, these Gospels are written very proximate to the events they describe. And I say this by the standards of, we're talking about historicity, of any historian.
What? Did he just
Josephus
say
wrote about
that?
shit in his own lifetime. The Mark, the earliest of the Gospels, is at minimum 30 years
30
after.
years. Yeah.
Like, that's more than an entire generation. That'd be like my
During that
my
age. Yeah,
kids having a kid, and then those kids writing down my
Mhm.
verbal account of September 11th, 2001.
yeah.
Wow.
Oracle document.
70 AD, would you say, with the mark?
Yes, I mean, I would say within decades of the events that they
But
describe.
crucially,
Yes.
would you agree with most historians that this happened, for example, after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, thereby allowing the author of Mark to put the prediction in the words of Jesus' mouth without
Well,
being anything miraculous?
This is a highly debated point because Mark's gospel leaves off incomplete and has what seems to be at the very end an added section. I don't want to debate that little fragment.
Oh, I bet you don't. I don't know why you brought it up.
Right? Like, we're talking about if your shit is true, and you're like, oh, well, here's
Yeah.
a thing that was made up and added in. Cool. Problem solved. You've just admitted a huge portion of the most important part of your book is definitely fabricated and added in later.
So what else is fabricated that we don't know is fabricated because no one has the originals? What else was put in there? We don't know. We have no idea. And then, but these people in the same breath will say that, oh, we know there was added later, but still the most reliable historic work in existence. How is that possible?
It's 1984 shit. I'm starting to wonder if Orwell wasn't warning about coming fascism, but was actually trying to create an allegory for something like Christianity that forms the entire organizational thinking for the Western world to a large extent even today, with stuff like the Ministry of Truth, where they would take newspaper reports from years ago and edit them after the fact, as if to erase the history that was there before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mark, here's what I'm getting at.
What, the
if you've
resurrection?
never read the Bible, and we've all read the Bible in a way, I was raised Catholic, and so I was habituated to going to Sunday Mass and sort of felt like I didn't know the Bible. I've heard these stories read and so on. But it was a completely different experience for me as an adult to go back with critical skepticism and just read the book of Mark straight through. It has the complete ring of authenticity. And
What?
How are you analyzing that? It has the ring of... It sounds true. That is not how we evaluate the historical accuracy of a text. So we don't say, hey, it rings true. It feels true. Like deep in my balls, it feels true. What are you...
My goodness.
Dinesh, what the hell? What is this man on? Like, seriously, what happened here?
Mark, chapter 4, verse 30.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Again, he said, what shall we say the kingdom of God is like? Or what parable shall we use to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on earth. It rings true, though. Never mind that it's demonstrably false. Never mind that a living God would know that's not true. Never mind that the people in the area at the time were aware that orchid seeds are smaller than mustard seeds. It rings true. Get out of here, Dinesh.
Wow. That's insane. And I mean, look at the long ending. You know, his followers will be able to handle snakes without being poisoned and drink poison without being harmed. Does that
lay
ring
on hands
true?
and heal anyone?
Right. What is it? That's Mark 16, I think it is.
I'm not sure. And unfortunately, I closed the damn book, so I gotta go look at Let's see. I'm pretty sure this leaves a note for where the long ending begins. Because it's the New International Version.
Okay. He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whomever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And those signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people and they will get well. After the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven and he sat at the right hand of God. Then the disciples went out and preached everywhere, and the Lord worked with them and confirmed his word by the signs that accompanied it. Made up. Added in later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's...
And the note in the Bible is the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 to 20. It's made up. It was put in there by the church.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, this version, this copy of the New International Version, it ends at verse 8 in chapter 16, and then it has the note about the added in bit, and then it has the rest. It adds the long ending as a footnote rather than as actual verse. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, it's a footnote.
All agree that it was added. Like it's overwhelming consensus of scholars say, well, yeah, that was added, because it just was. I mean, you encounter people that are like, well, no, the real ending was the long ending and that it was corrupted, and it's like, no, the earliest manuscripts have this shorter ending in it before this was even written. Like, seriously, come on now.
Mm-hmm. And it's a weird ending too, because some of it's demonstrably false, like the laying on hands and healing, unless of course they're not real Christians. That's all they're proving, is there are no real Christians. They're all false believers.
And no one's drinking poison and not being harmed. You know, like that's not happening.
Yeah, it's weird to put that kind of criteria in there, a way to directly falsify your faith. But the driving out demons thing, that resonates for another reason, because there's another passage, I forget which book it's in, but it talks about false believers. You know, people who stand before the Father and say they drove out demons in Jesus' name, and Jesus goes, I never knew you.
Wow.
I say this because not only does it give you little details that don't really seem to even belong there. It's clearly not written with a polemical purpose exclusively. Mark will tell you things that not only seem irrelevant, but at other times undermine what he's trying to say. And that is the true ring of authenticity. Because if someone were to... What's that?
An example?
Well, here's an example. In the Jewish tradition, the testimony of a woman was considered inherently suspect.
It's really good debate tactics too. Like, he makes a claim. Could you please demonstrate that claim? Could you give us an example of what you're claiming is true?
But the testimony of men generally reliable, and therefore not that the testimony of women is disregarded altogether, but you needed, for example, many women to say the same thing. Now, the Gospels tell us that when Jesus was crucified and put in the tomb, if I were Mark or I were Luke, and I were trying to be inventive, and I were trying to establish a truth for posterity, I would not have it that a group of, let's just say, hysterical women, Mary Magdalene, whoever it was, a group of women go to the tomb, and they are the ones who find the tomb empty. This is like a little dubious, because most people are going to go, well, yeah, we know, but women, you know. So here's an example of the Gospels insisting upon a point that would only make sense if that was actually the way it happened.
Allow me to answer that, if I may.
Go ahead.
If I may.
He picked an example that's a super easy own.
We've all heard this. Yeah.
This is a commonly presented argument for the historicity of the resurrection, which, by the way, now we're talking as...
Well, I'm not necessarily... No, hold on. I didn't say it's an argument for the historicity of the resurrection. I said it was an argument...
Let me say...
Yeah, don't let him come in.
It would.
Okay.
Because he didn't say that you're saying that. He said it is a commonly presented argument for the historicity of the resurrection, and it is. That is absolutely true. A lot of apologists present, hey, why have the women discover it first if they want people to believe it, kind of thing? Why have the women?
Now we're talking about these texts if they are historical texts. The thing about the women is, look, this is quite straightforward to me. Who anoints bodies? Who goes to tombs and anoints bodies after someone dies? It's not men, it's women. And so if the authors of the Gospels had the men go to the tomb to anoint the body, which is what Mary and the other women were doing when they went to the tomb, that itself would be very strange and give us reason to doubt the historicity of the event. In other words, it's like if there's a task that women do, and that task is how Jesus's empty tomb is discovered, then why would he invent it? Why would they invent a story that has men going and doing it? Second,
Right. So it would basically be the same as, you know, a person died and the butcher went to the morgue to autopsy the body. Why? Why was the butcher doing that? Oh, you know, the hairdresser went to autopsy the body. Why? Like, why? That's so stupid. The women had to be the one to find the body because they were the ones doing the anointing. But so on point. I wonder what Dinesh is going to say about this. This is going to be good. This is going to be good.
you said
Like
that
he
you
got
need
caught in a
multiple
level 1 trap.
women's testimony. How many women go to the tomb? Multiple. Thirdly, what do the women do immediately after seeing the empty tomb? They run and tell the men who come and verify it for us.
Right.
So I don't think that this fulfills the criterion of embarrassment at all. In fact, I think the opposite is true. I think that if this was an invented story, I'm not saying it is, by the way, but if it were, then of course we could expect the people who discover the empty tomb to be women, because it's women who go to anoint the body at the tomb.
Okay, so let's put together what I just said and you just said, and let's ask the question, based upon what you said and what I said, did it happen that way? And I would submit that what you have done, see, you're doing special pleadings. You could argue I'm doing special pleadings, but
How
What?
is he special pleading?
It's not. Does Dinesh not know what special pleading means? Because explaining that if I say firemen go to put out a fire, that's not special pleading. That's what they do. I'm explaining that is what they do. What the hell?
I don't understand how that's special pleading. He's not saying, hey, there's a special exemption for these particular stories. He's saying at the time, it is perfectly consistent with their culture that the women went to anoint the bodies. He's not special pleading in any way. He's sort of saying, hey, that is the usual thing that's happened. So that story, you're sort of saying, hey, there would be no reason why culturally, and don't forget, Dinesh was talking culturally because he was like, women weren't believed, so they wouldn't have used them. He's saying, no, culturally, that there is a really good reason why it would be the women, and it is not, it would be because they're the ones to find the body, culturally. And Dinesh is now saying, well, what?
I would admit that the thrust of the Bible and the thrust of the story is in fact aimed at delivering a truth from Revelation.
That's fine.
What you're trying to do is saying, all right, I can't contest that because that's outside the domain of reason. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to adopt sort of the nitpicking strategy. And because we got 4 accounts,
hold on, you're the one who brought that up. You're the one who said that
I did.
Women discovering
and
the
I'm
tomb.
saying nothing you've said has even slightly refuted it.
You don't think anything I just said refuted the idea that would be something you wouldn't expect from the gospel authors if it were invented?
No, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that I mean, let's look at what we agree on, what we disagree on.
Wow. Wait a second. You brought that up. That was your example, Dinesh.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. Did he forget who brought that subject up?
He may have.
You're
I
nitpicking.
really think his brain is broken. He's got
Wow.
no concept of how logic works at all, because Alex is pointing out why our criteria of embarrassment doesn't apply here. And Dinesh
Right.
is saying, right, but that doesn't disprove the events happening, though. You didn't contradict the story, though.
So
In fact, Alex went out of his way to specifically say, I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Right.
I'm saying why that doesn't give you criteria of embarrassment.
Right. So Dinesh is basically saying, hey, because of this instance of the women finding the body, that is evidence that the story is not fabricated, because using women to discover the body is embarrassing to the author or unlikely to be used. And Alex explains why that makes the story more plausible from an inventive point of view, and he says you're nitpicking. No, he's he's objecting on valid grounds to your reasoning, Dinesh. What is going on? I feel like I've stepped into an alternate reality here. What's going on?
You agree that in that culture, the testimony of women in general counts for less.
I think this is something that Josephus tells us, but it's impossible to know what sort of culturally people actually thought at the time. It's impossible for us to know. I'm happy to grant it. Yeah, sure.
It's impossible for us to know, even though Josephus says it. Okay,
Well, that's in a court of law, right?
No, but what I'm saying is, if you're applying the "is it impossible for us to know," I would suggest to you it is impossible for us to know that it was the absolute and unwavering duty of women to provide all the ointments. You stated that as a fact.
No,
I would say it's impossible for us to know.
What I'm saying is that if somebody's reading this text and you say, well, if this were invented, why would it be women who discover the tomb? That would be embarrassing for them, the so-called embarrassment criterion. I'm saying, would it not be just, is not the fact that we're told why they're going to the tomb to anoint the body, is this not just reason enough?
No.
I mean, look, I'm not the one claiming I know how this went down, by the way. And also, you just accused me a second ago of special pleading. I wanted to ask you what it was that I'm specially pleading.
Well, what I'm saying is that you have an event. These events are described with great precision and a sort of eyewitness presence there. Now, we know in some cases there weren't eyewitnesses, but there.
Who was the eyewitness of Mary going to the tomb alone and also going with a couple of friends and also like great precision, but also who was the witness here? Remember, what was it, Matthew or Luke, one of those, where they saw the angel and the angel said, "The Lord is not here. Tell no one." And then they told no one. Well, where the fuck did the story come from?
Right. It reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's like no man has seen the ship and lived, and you know, Jack Sparrow's like, well, where do the stories come from, I wonder? You know, that makes no sense. God, we're only about halfway through, Ember. I'm terrible, mate. I'm so sorry. Darling, I'm gonna have to put it on a part 2, because this will go like 6 hours if I leave it go. So I really do apologize to everybody, but this is gonna have to be a part 2. It's gonna be in a couple of weeks. I think we're going back to your wonderful channel, and please do subscribe to Ember's channel. Amazing. Rembrandt, don't get semantics on me. How dare you? How dare you?
You've been Rembrandted.
How dare you? I have been Rembrandted. I've been. I feel like Dinesh D'Souza right now. Rembrandt, how dare you?
Yeah, we traditionally do end up part 2ing some of these longer ones.
Yeah.
It happens.
This is good though. This is amazing. Dinesh is being destroyed. I cannot even explain how much he is being destroyed. Like,
Has he even landed a single point?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Oh, thank you so much, Barnaby. And Barnaby actually sent 2 super chats during the celebration, which they're exactly the same. So I must have thought they're the same one. I do apologize, Barnaby. You are a champion for $5. Greetings to arguably the best 1 to 2 creationist punch this side of the Milky Way. Look, creationist haymakers, we got them. We got them. Thank you so much, Barnaby Wild. I really appreciate it, mate. Absolute legend. But you know, it's kind of it's a little humiliating that you've just restricted us to this side of the universe. You know, I mean, how do you know how good the apologists are in, you know, Alpha, the outside of the Virgo supercluster? How do you know? I'm trying to think of a galaxy outside of the Milky Way, and I'm coming up nothing. You're the person that does cosmology. What have you got?
I hear in the Pinwheel Galaxy, they're pretty spot on.
There you go.
With their made up nonsense.
Nice, absolutely. But yeah, and don't forget to go and give some love to Ember as well. Their channel is amazing. I'm gonna get you a link for it. It should be linked in the title and in the description and everywhere else I can basically put it, because the channel's amazing. You also do work on the transposition, which I do want to plug as well. Transposition, so it advocates for and explains trans attitudes and values from a number of really good friends of the community. You've got Bree, you've got Steph, you've got the lovely Ember, of course. Who else do you have on there? You have another couple of people, don't you?
Just one main correspondent, Carly Chardonnay Webb from Outsports. She's
Right,
another trans athlete who does trans sports news. That's what Outsports is for, and she comes by and does like a really comprehensive sports segment, covers a bunch of topics, analysis, interviews. She's really good.
Keep your egos in check. Yeah, absolutely. But I got you, mate. It's all fun. It's all just joking. Absolutely. Yeah, you keep us honest. You really do. But thank you so much, Ember. We'll be on your channel next time.
Yep, we've got the part 2 from the thing that we started last week.
Which was, God, I've had a mental blank. Why can't I remember that?
Yeah, I kind of am too, actually, because my brain is focused on Dinesh and Alex here.
I think my brain just broke from the stupidity of Dinesh's arguments.
It's possible. Dan Baker versus Trent Horn is done imaginary.
Trent Horn, that's right. Look, even Trent was doing better than Dinesh here. Dinesh is, and I want to give a big shout out. Thank you so much to Robin as well, who sent it over. She said Dinesh she wasn't wrong. Wow, this is bad, like really bad. So I really want to thank you. Yeah, full props to Robin. I'm also going to post a link to I do a games channel where I'm currently swearing at Elden Ring. So if you want to see me mad, join my gaming channel, and you definitely will, because I am mad at Elden Ring. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and don't forget to be kind to yourself, be kind to each other, and have a really good day. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Bye.